that's one of the reasons to go into closed early before that item comes up, so that we can discuss it, amend do it properly on the agenda and the minutes. I'm sorry, and then come back. So that's one of the reasons we're doing it.
Well, then why was it put on the agenda in the way it was if it's incorrect, and we have to go into in-camera and amend it?
Yeah, but okay, thank you. That's the reason we're going. One of the reasons. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to note before you proceed, if you could please make a note that item E3, I'll be declaring a conflict.
Sorry, I'm still having trouble with my audio. Can you just hold on half a sec? I don't know if that's the button to push or something. You try it again.
Can you hear me?
Did you get in?
I'm okay here, but I cannot.
I don't know why this is not working. Okay, go ahead. I'll just put my speakers up.
Other people can hear me though, right? It's not my audio.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's not you on your end. I think it's my end.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to note when you proceed with item E3
Can you just do it? I'm getting very stressed.
What are you trying to do? Oh, you got
I'm trying to go on video.
Okay, I'm sorry. On which item?
Mr. Mayor, there's too many people with their mics open right now.
Yeah, if everyone could just mute their mics, and except for Councillor Woodward. Councillor Woodward, which item was it?
E3.
P as in Pop?
No, Echo 3. Truck route.
It's just a report for information, Your Worship. Anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Long.
Oh, it's not just sorry, but it's not just a report for information. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm on the line. I'll put my hand up.
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, the reason I'm doing this just a couple of times on Zoom, it's not great. So just want you to note before you proceed with an item that I'll be declaring a conflict on this. Sometimes I've had to interrupt the meeting for that. So I just want to get in the habit of doing this at the agenda, just to let you know. All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we can't hear you.
Can't hear a thing.
Councillor
Jack.
Davis, on the agenda, please.
Okay, on the agenda, I know it may be trivial, but it's not just a report for information. I think that we could move something along, but I'm just worried that maybe I don't know my information then.
It'll come up at that time, then we can discuss it, but it is on the agenda. So
you look like you're ready to fly in a fighter jet, Jack.
I am in a fighter jet. All right, with that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor and opposed?
I'm opposed. The agenda is incorrect.
Councillor Richter is opposed.
Opposed as well.
I'm sorry, who else? Councillor Woodward is opposed. That motion carries. We move on to the regular council meeting of November 9th. Adoption of minutes. Could I have a motion, please?
So move.
Davis, and a seconder. Could I have a second? Councillor Whitmarsh. Discussion. Seeing none. No errors and omissions. All those in favor?
Sorry, Your Worship. Are you just doing B1 or are you doing B1?
I'm just doing B1. I'm just doing B1. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. And B1, the public hearing minutes with a motion with an amendment that Councillor Long was opposed in D2 to change that. With that change, I would ask for a motion.
So moved.
Councillor Long, seconder. Councillor Kunst, discussion, errors, omissions, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried.
Opposed.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Richter is opposed. Okay. And move on to presentations. And we have a presentation from Fortis BC's 30 by 30 plan. And Mr. Darren Wong is Community and Indigenous Relations Manager of Fortis BC regarding Fortis BC vision for lowering BC's GHG emissions while meeting BC's energy needs. Welcome here, Mr. Wong, and you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Your Worship and Council. I'll just bring up a presentation here. So good afternoon again, everyone, and I'm glad to see that everyone is staying well in spite of the challenging circumstances. I'd like to first acknowledge that I'm delivering our presentation on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. My name is Darren Wong, and I'm Fortis BC's Community and Indigenous Relations Manager for the Lower Mainland. I'd like to spend the next few minutes of the day to talk about how we're helping the Township of Laneway meet your climate goals. So some of you may not be aware of this, but Fortis BC is actually the province's largest deliverer of energy, with our utility being responsible for delivering 21% of the province's energy needs. In the Lower Mainland, Fortis BC is the utility that delivers natural gas and renewable gas to customers, but we also serve electricity to many communities in the Kootenays and the Okanagan. We also own 4 hydroelectric dams, as well as approximately 7,200 kilometers of electricity lines, in addition to 49,000 kilometers of gas lines. So because we provide electricity to many communities in the province, we understand the risks and the challenges with relying on one system to meet the province's climate goals. So therefore, it was important for us to play an important role in the development of the province's plan, Clean BC. As some of you may be aware, the Clean BC target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is reducing those emissions from 40% from 2007 levels by the year 2030. And as part of the consultations for the development of that plan, we submitted our plan, the Clean Growth Pathway to 2050, which outlined the role that FortisBC could play in helping the province meet that target. So to get to 2030, we've had to set our own target for the next 10 years. And our target is 30 by 30. And what that is that it's our target to reduce our customers' greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by the year 2030. And it is one of the most ambitious targets for a utility in Canada today. So how are we going to get to 30% reduction by 2030? Well, we have 4 pillars. The first pillar is energy efficiency and conservation. And we're investing about $90 million annually by the year 2022. And some of these investments include rebates and programs and supports to make new and existing buildings more energy efficient. The second pillar of our strategy is to increase the supply of renewable natural gas. So this includes sources derived from organic materials such as landfills and wastewater treatment plants, but includes other sources such as wood waste. By 2030, 15% of the gas that we deliver in our system will need to come from carbon neutral and renewable sources by the year 2030. And more supply of this is coming. Over the past year, our team has been hard at work getting a number of projects approved by the BC Utilities Commission. The third pillar here is global LNG. And we think there's a good opportunity for us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in sectors that are challenging to electrify, such as marine shipping. Some of our customers include BC Ferries and C-SPAN. And the fourth pillar here is in making investments in zero and low carbon transportation. So in our electric service territory, that includes deploying rapid charging electric vehicle stations, and then helping other communities and customers transition their medium and heavy duty fleets to compressed natural gas. And some of these types of vehicles include waste haulers, delivery trucks, and transit buses. So we believe that in working with you and the rest of the township of Langley to get to our 30 by 30 target, we think will set us on a good path to getting to the province's 2050 greenhouse gas emission targets. And we think in 2050, we'll need to use the electric and the gas systems to get there. And our vision is supported by a study that we commissioned with Guidehouse Consulting, which examined 2 pathways for achieving the province's 80% emissions reduction target. One of those pathways focused on significant electrification, while the second focused on utilizing both energy systems that we enjoy in the province today, which the study called the Diversified Pathway. A copy of this Energy Pathways report can be found on our website at fortisbc.com/30 by 30. And I'll speak briefly to 3 key conclusions from that report. The first is that the report found that both pathways, the electrification and the diversified pathways, can achieve the same greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2050. The second point that I'd like to highlight is that under the diversified pathway, the gas system will need to carry a significant amount of renewable carbon neutral gas by 2050. In fact, 73% of the gas carried in that system will need to come from renewable sources such as organic waste, wastewater treatment plants, as well as emerging technologies like hydrogen injection. And the third point that the report highlighted was that both systems are actually key to meeting peak demand. So you'll recall in January, we had a bit of a cold snap. And in fact, on the coldest day in the province, January 14th, the gas system delivered the equivalent of 18,000 megawatts of energy, which was almost double BC Hydro's peak load of 10,000 megawatts. So what the study found under the electrification pathway is that in order to replace the gas system's role in water and space heating in peak demand situations, the province would require approximately 8,800 megawatts of electricity generation. It's a pretty significant number. So the main takeaway that I wanted to leave with you is that we think there are different ways to achieve the targets that we need to achieve that utilize the existing infrastructure that we enjoy today, both above ground and underground. And the decisions that you make today and tomorrow with respect to community planning, as well as future energy needs, should consider a broader context with respect to affordability, impacts to your community, and community resilience. So that concludes my presentation. I hope that the last 5 minutes were just a preview of the important conversations that we'd like to have with you and your community going forward. Our line is always open, and we'd be happy to have a follow-up presentation on any of the materials or reports that I touched on today. So thanks for your time. Happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and what Fortis is doing. It's interesting, a company that we primarily see as one that is transporting liquid natural gas around to all our homes and businesses, also is involved in electrification. That was kind of new to me. So interesting how you're combining that to reach your goals of reducing your GHGs. So thank you for that. I have a question from Councillor Arneson. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you very much for coming today. I know and appreciate the role that you have in making sure that there's a safe and reliable source of fuel for our communities as we go forward. Obviously, our needs and ideas align that way. I have a question regarding some of the expression of opportunities going forward. So the cogeneration aspect, do you have any idea currently about what percentage of your I'll call it your energy is available through either business or private endeavors as an expression of a percentage, perhaps, in our province?
So thanks for the question, Councillor Arneson. I just like some clarification with respect to the cogeneration aspect of that question. I'm not sure.
Okay. For example, I know that in Surrey they have a biofuel project, that kind of thing. And I know homes and others and methane and, there's many different ways to provide energy. So I'm just wondering if you could express, is it a very small percentage? Is it minuscule? Is it 5%? Just along those kind of lines.
Okay. So thanks again for clarifying that, Councillor Arneson. With respect to renewable natural gas, it's a small percentage right now, but we know that in the marketplace, there's incredible demand for the product right now. And with respect to the projects I spoke about in my presentation, we've had a number of those projects approved by the BC Utilities Commission this year. So once these projects are up and running, it's over 10. We expect that we'll be able to hit that 5% target. So with respect to the BC government's plan and and the obligations they placed on us, we have to get to 15% renewable natural gas by the year 2030.
Yeah, so, and if I could just follow up on that. So is it Fortis BC themselves as an arm of your operation that works with local municipalities in order to achieve some of these? If there was a project that had been identified, for example, in a climate action strategy that would achieve that result, is that correct?
Yeah, so we're open to working with all sorts of organizations, whether that's, as you rightly point out, with respect to the City Surrey biofuel facility, or working with private companies such as farms. So, something that I can say for your information is, with respect to the Township of Laneway, we're hoping to get a senior energy specialist hired soon, and understand there's a process around that, and so. The intent of funding a position with the Township of Laneway at the staff level is to identify potential opportunities in the future, working with the township going forward and identifying new sources of renewable natural gas.
Thank you. And just one final thought, as I often do when we're talking about climate action, I'm hoping that there might be some consideration to go to the Climate Action Committee at Metro and give a similar presentation to the committee members there, just for their information.
That's a very good suggestion. Thanks a lot. We'll take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Wong, for your presentation. So when you, carrying on in that same discussion in terms of renewable gas, that's quite a goal. It's saying that it will be the majority of fuel by 2050, whereas, as you just mentioned, it's only a fraction of that now. So will Fortis maybe be partnering with municipalities and creating more biogas plants? We are a good source of organic product. That's our gig, right? Our residents do produce that. So do you think that's where this may be heading, that there may be some partnership opportunities with Fortis and local government and others perhaps to build more of these facilities such as Councillor Arneson mentioned that Surrey has?
So thanks a lot for the question, Councillor Long. I think really it's working with everybody, working with municipalities, working with anybody who's interested in identifying new sources of renewable natural gas, as well as getting those online. Because, you know, as the report talked about, obviously in terms of the future and in terms of getting to where we need to be, it's going to require significant work, and there's definitely a challenge ahead of us. And so what the report is saying is certainly not lost on us, and I think we need to uncover every possible opportunity. And as far as working with the Township of Laneway, I mean, we're definitely open to it. And you know, as I noted in my remarks to Councillor Arneson, is that we hope to fund a position at staff level very soon. And I understand that it's in the hiring process right now. So once that person is funded and brought on board on that staff, we hope that that can provide an opportunity to investigate some of those opportunities.
Okay, because just let me say that up until now, I think there have been very large corporations have embarked upon very large projects, such as the one in Surrey, fabulous facility. But there's an issue there. A, the cost's huge, and then transportation. So to feed the beast, you have to truck everything in from everywhere. And if the facility is as large as that, you're going to have an issue with capacity, in that you need a lot of capacity to keep it operating. And it would seem to me that technology is leading to the point where these can be much smaller facilities, far less perhaps obtrusive or intrusive, I should say, to the community. You wouldn't have to transport as far. So I could see one day, you know, every municipalities of certain size having their own small biodigesters. And of course, the only issue would be who's going to help us pay for that. So maybe there will be some partnership opportunities in the future that we can embark upon. So I'm going to mark that on my calendar and see what happens by 2050, if I was right or not. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. There are no further questions. Thank you for your presentation, and we appreciate hearing about the work that Fortis is doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next presentation is from Small Housing BC, and Mr. Jake Fry from Small Housing BC is here regarding smaller housing options. And,
thank you, Councillor and Mayor. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I guess I'll just do my best here to share my screen. Just bear with me for a second. Am I showing my presentation? Is it coming across?
Yes, it looks good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I know time is tight, so I'll just marshal right into this for a second. And so I'm here representing Small Housing BC. Small Housing BC, as the name implies, is a nonprofit organization. We focus on research and advocacy, primarily around housing, which promotes smaller forms of housing that are now getting introduced into more urban and semi-urban areas. We've been in existence since 2012. We've done quite a bit of research, and we've been heavily supported by the Real Estate Foundation of BC, along with BC Housing and Van City, along with a couple of organizations such as CMHC. For us, we're really focusing on how to create more sustainable housing, and also housing which really focuses on the current needs in the communities across BC, where housing and housing affordability is an acute problem. What we see is that small housing holds a real solution to a lot of the challenges that were being faced, and is something that can be done at a grassroots level. And before we start, I guess part of this is what is small housing, and it's a fairly elastic term. What we're really referring to is an array of houses, which probably size-wise, you know, and things like tiny homes are about 100 square feet or so, but really focusing on what is able to support a family, meet the needs of a family adequately, and whether that's adjacent housing or infill housing, or iterations such as micro suites that we've seen in more super urban areas. They really encompass quite an array of homes that we're promoting. But if I was to define what a small house is, or what a small housing unit is, it's enough that completely meets the needs of the inhabitants of that dwelling. we had done a study, probably one of the earlier projects we did a study and really identified the best forms of the smaller typologies across North America. We won't have time to look at all of them today, but I did want to highlight a few things I think could be quite appropriate to Langley, which is small lot homes, houseplexes, cottage housing, and laneway homes or coach houses. We can see when we talked about size, these are sort of generally range from that 1,200 square feet and smaller for dwelling units. And I think the biggest thing, and I know we've seen a lot in the press around tiny homes and various gestures, but I think really the popularity of that movement, which I think is very much a vanguard movement, really speaks to how a lot of what our traditional housing, which was established in the 20s in this province and onward, has become a little out of sync with what our needs are. Whether we have a significant part of our population which is aging out of the workforce, we have young people which have really acute affordability problems when it comes to finding forms of housing, and it is these two demographics that tend to be really attracted to the type of housing that we're talking about. And is very important to the sort of ongoing spectrum of housing that we're able to provide balanced communities. So, and I think it's interesting just to show you this map. I know everyone's on the council and the mayor, I'm sure you're well aware, but this is always, it's a great little snapshot of our region. Identifying the brighter yellow area is actually all the land that's set aside for what we would consider traditional single family homes. And we see there's a huge opportunity. There's been a number of studies done by the Builders Association, along with countless others who've studied urban cities, studying this landmass and how a lot of the key to our affordability issues will actually fall into our opportunities that exist, utilizing this land base, which is already set aside for residential space. So I'll quickly go over a couple of case studies. So this is some homes that I think would be appropriate to Langley that could be considered as part of your ongoing greenfield developments, or in those more established parts of the city that can, in the residential areas, it can be utilized. So one is which is a houseplex, whether it's adapting an older home or building a new home, where we have something which visually looks very much like a larger single family home, but would actually hold up to maybe 3 or 4 residential units. Sometimes these can be privately owned, or they could be certainly for rental. It's something which is a great opportunity to be able to go into existing neighborhoods and utilize buildings which are already there, or certainly be able to add to the living space without changing the visual dynamic and charm that neighborhoods tend to have when they've been established for a long time. Small lot homes, which is a particular favorite of mine. These are where we take city lots. It's been a very popular down in Los Angeles and Portland, where we start to add almost like micro row houses on single family lots. Again, you might be looking at living units that are between 12, sometimes 1,400 square feet, but they exist. Often we'll see them in corners of properties, or in LA, they started doing in Houston, a lot of mid-block developments where you have something that really complements the neighborhood, but you get all the privileges of sort of private ownership and the equity and security that can bring a family. Meanwhile, we're utilizing the land quite effectively and able to provide a smaller square footage living spaces, which inherently onto themselves can create a lot of affordability opportunities. Jumping ahead, Laneway Housing, this is something I quite like. We've seen this really take off in cities in Vancouver and North Vancouver, taking that residential space in the back, or a non-residential space in back of a traditional property and adding a home. It's been a very successful program. And in fact, they've actually gone statewide in California. So every residence is mandated to be able to have one of these across California. And again, they can be quite an elegant little way to have a starter home. Some areas, these are strata titled, others, they are strictly rental initiatives. Lastly, this is something we've seen really flourish. There's a new development down in Delta called Southlands, called cottages or pocket neighborhoods, they've been coined, where you take what might be 1 or 2 pieces of residential land and actually create like a beautiful little English commons around them. Smaller homes, generally under 1,000 square feet, 800 square feet, but it creates a great little community We'll have areas with nodal parking, and so we're not unnecessarily always associating a car with a house, and maximizes green space and livability. To jump on what we're doing looking ahead, we've been working across the province with a couple of municipalities looking at a program called Permanently Affordable Housing. What this is something where what we've tried to do is create a scenario where we'll take a single family home, whether it's a heritage project or a new build, allow a certain amount of extra density, that density is turned into, the value of that density is turned into one living unit, which is ostensibly subsidized. And so what happens, it goes on the market for below market rate if it was a small strata complex. And you would be able to produce housing for a much lower income cohort of people. This wouldn't necessarily be subsidized housing, but in the graph in the bottom right of your screen illustrates new sales in Vancouver area, and where we see only about 8% of the residential single family homes are actually affordable to people of income strata. This is the idea of how do we start to get people at mean income into an affordability model. And this is something we feel quite strongly. There's some great opportunities to do this. And what's lovely and elegant about this program is that you really end up with a community supporting itself and creating its own housing solutions, which doesn't require government funding. And in some cases, if they're strata title, actually bring revenue into the government, local government. And in a case like this looks at a Vancouver property where we can see most of the units are selling at the 900,000 mark. And yet we're able to produce one more unit than you normally would, and that comes in under $400,000. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. I see I'm just under my 10 minutes, so if there's any questions, I'd love to answer them for you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Richter. That's a question.
Yes, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. I do have two questions. Number one, at the start of your presentation, you referenced family housing, and you also referenced the size of these units from 100 square feet up to 1,400 square feet. I'm just wondering, I don't think a family can live comfortably in 100 square feet, can they? That's question number one.
Certainly.
Question number two is, you know, there's been a lot done to promote these smaller housing units, but I don't think they're affordable because of the market prices that are being charged to rent them. So how do we fix this? I mean, the whole idea of having these units is to increase affordable housing options in a community. But if people are having to pay, and we've had a recent situation like this in Langley, considerable rent in order to live in these little micro units, I don't get how that's affordable. So your comments would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to answer your first question, I agree. We're not advocating in any way that 100 square feet would be family housing. Where we see that coming into play is micro suites, which is great for student housing. And that was really more of a reference that, you know, looking toward these tiny homes, that they have captured people's imagination. So we know there's an appetite for people, but not as a really a permanent housing solution. It's more of something as I said, more of a vanguard movement. To your question about affordability, I think it's incredibly valid. And it's a significant concern. For some disclosure, I do own a design build firm as well that does a lot of these infill houses in Vancouver. What we have found is that for our clientele, and we've built about 320 homes now over the last few years, generally what you're dealing with is adult children, somebody in their 30s, they've done a trial run with a retriever, they're ready to start a golden retriever, and they're ready to start a family. So what happens is this is a very affordable way for them to actually get into a single family market. So one of the parents will likely give them some land. You can build in the backyard, you afford it. And for $300,000 or $400,000, if they're doing something very elegant, they end up with a 1,000 square foot home. It's quite affordable. Their mortgage is under $1,600, and ostensibly they have a single family home and they're building up equity. This will be sort of an ad hoc family arrangement. We've also seen a lot of people leaving the workforce who build these structures for themselves. And what they do is they finance that utilizing their current asset and leverage this. They'll live in the back, and then they'll open up family housing, the principal residence in the property to live in. So those are sort of examples where there's a level of affordability that otherwise wouldn't be in the market. As I mentioned in the end of my presentation, what's near and dear to my heart is this perpetual affordable movement, where what we're doing is working with BC Housing and municipalities that are interested in working us will help develop a set of bylaws or potentially a pilot program where we would take one of these structures, add a little extra density that would otherwise be built on this family lot, maybe a couple of units, but we end up with a really deeply subsidized unit, which is affordable to quite an array of people. And that's an ownership model, which we think is really interesting, because then you start to get people who would otherwise be in a perpetual rental situation actually having the opportunity to get that security that comes with ownership. And that stays in perpetuity. That unit is forever affordable, and that's built into the actual. It has to be managed by the municipalities, but it's built into the nature of the title of the property.
Thank you very much. I just, again, a follow-up question. If we're trying to maximize the land that we've got and create as much affordable housing as we can, does it not make sense just to pull down and put higher density condominium type units in there?
I think there will be a place for a number of different iterations. And to your point, yeah, and I do believe, Councillor, that in some cases, building that 13-story or 14-story building that has 20% density and for subsidized housing is completely appropriate. On the other hand, as we noticed, there's a vast majority of our land is held by single family homes. And to be able to, over a broader area, distribute that affordability and have the municipality not be burdened with meeting relaxations or having to actually put resources into that, but actually have the private market do that. And on top of that, and potentially increase the revenue base of that same municipality for other programs. I think there's something that's really quite elegant about that. And although it's not a silver bullet, it is something that can definitely complement what's happening within a community and actually have a significant impact with a very low threshold of pain for the communities themselves.
Thank you for your presentation today.
You're welcome.
Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship, and thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I think it's very timely because later on our agenda, we're looking at our revised housing action plan and figuring out from a target point of view how we can create the kind of housing typologies that we need, and most particularly affordable homes. I do have a couple of questions because you referenced case studies and the ability to work with different communities. So I'm wondering from your experience, if you have a neighborhood plan, for example, going forward, at what point would it be most advisable to consider a pilot project in that kind of context for some of the options you're talking about?
Well, I think what's really, thank you, Councillor. And I think if you were engaging in an ongoing discussion, I think the one thing that's really nice about bringing these pilot projects in fairly early, and I'll cite again, the Laneway House program in Vancouver, that was brought in, it was brought in citywide. And that was done to mitigate any artificial inflations of land values. If something is citywide and it's permitted everywhere, it has a kind of leveling effect. We did a study about 2.5 years into that program. It was ostensibly a 100-unit pilot. There was a review after 100 units went in. We actually did a review of the first 300 homes and the 9 direct neighbors of the first 300 units. It was done by the Mistel Group. And what we found was that introduction of that different, at that point, radically different housing type was quickly adapted because the benefits were prevalent to the neighbors over the detraction. And what we found was that after a home had gone in, someone might be concerned about parking, someone might be concerned about shadowing. But what we found overwhelmingly after in that interview, any neighbor who was beside one of these homes, after about they were there longer than 6 months, about 30% of the people were now considering that as an option for themselves. So speaking to the thing, the initiating a pilot, I think what we have seen in most communities across the province is that affordability is such an issue, and there's an appetite. And if we can start to deliver some affordability without changing the tone and the feel of the neighborhoods by introducing this in a very subtle way, there's a lot of acceptance. And I think there's a lot of appetite for people to utilize what they already have to their own betterment, and at the same time provide this resource of housing in a meaningful way.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up question, because affordability comes at all different levels in terms of housing. So I'm wondering if you've done any drilling down, or if that's part of the scope of the work that you do, to discuss the carbon emissions from smaller homes as opposed to heating and cooling a larger building. Because to me, that's a longer term economic sustainability argument that could be made for a smaller footprint.
Well, it's a great, and I thank you for bringing that up, because it's actually one of my pet loves. It's near and dear to my heart. So I will say that basically what at the long and the short of it is, it's the devil's in the details. We're currently doing a couple of infill models right now where we really pay a fair amount of attention to what the materials that were being used. That these are wood-based products. In the sense of the housing, that they are small. I can tell you in one case, what we've done is we modeled out a new coach house that we've developed, and we were able to save enough carbon by using alternative foundation programs, which are all to code, and judiciously sort of picking the material we were able to use. We were able to drop the carbon impact of manufacturing at home compared to a traditional one of the same size, to a level that it's surpassed over 63 years of the operational carbon burden of that home. Wow. So we can it's pretty nice with these small homes, because the energy required to make them to operate them is low to begin with. And whether it's Greenbuild BC or whether it's Leeds USA, a smaller unit it's the most impactful thing you can do around environmental. So if we take that smaller home and then we compound it with using the correct materials, things that have a lot of carbon sequestration built into them, we're able to deliver something which, I hate throwing something out off the top of my head, but if we can think of a 14-story building made out of concrete, providing 50 units, I can assure you that we would be into, 2 or 3 or 4-fold of that in smaller homes to have that same carbon impact without really paying attention to what we could do, which would surpass that.
Thank you. I really appreciate your presentation, and it'd be interesting to follow up, I think, at some point. So thank you again.
Well, thank you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes, thanks very much for the presentation. It's really interesting to hear about particularly all the different kinds of housing options within this framework. So I really appreciate that. And I looked at your website and looked at the report that you have on small houses, which is quite a substantial report, including a lot of case studies, which is also very helpful. I'm just wondering what other sources, or is there other I don't know if it's websites or other locations where we could continue to get more information about small houses and how they could be done in our community, other than your website, which I do really like, but I'm wondering what other sources there might be that would be helpful for us.
I appreciate that. I will say that we're sort of a bit of a one-off in Canada, let alone BC, as this type of advocates, but I will definitely would suggest, if you look at in California, going back about 16 months ago, they did a statewide initiative that's specific to the infill housing, where we'd be putting a small coach house in the back or granny flat in the back of someone's property. LA has got some amazing documentation. Santa Cruz, Portland's done a lot of work on this. Portland's really, really interesting what they've done. Boston really came out with a a really aggressive program around affordability. They're looking at a heck of an increase bump if you do 100% affordability. So if you typical family homes at 0.5% of your property or 5% of your property, 50% of your land mass, they'll allow up to 200% of a single family lot if you produce out of that affordability. So you obviously it's a more urban center, something more like a little brownstone, but if you put in, if every unit's affordable, they'll let you go up to 4 times the density that you currently have on permitted. So it's more individual programs, and certainly I'm very happy to be contacted about this and direct the council as they want to specific things that I know about. We try to put those contacts on our website, so that is a good launching spot. That's probably the most I can answer, the best way I could answer that question, Councillor.
Okay, that's very helpful. I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. Well, thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for the presentation. Very enlightening. I know in Vancouver you have the shape of the lots, especially those lots that were built houses post-war, where there were small houses in the front of the lot and a big backyard for the garden, and now they're putting lane houses in, and then also with access to the backyard by lanes. So yeah, a little bit different than we have in Langley, but we do have a lot of areas where it's half-acre and 1 acre lots where I think there's opportunities to add homes.
If I could, one thing, Mayor, I would also direct you towards, there's a really interesting development in Tsawwassen by the Century Group called Southlands. It's a very diverse project. It's agricultural based. I know you do a lot of greenfield building there. I was down and toured it about a week and a half ago. It is remarkable. They have a number of these things that we've discussed today within that complex that's already there to look and touch and feel. I think they did a great job, and for what it's worth, I think it's that would be a terrific resource for your township as well.
Thank you. It reminds me of when I started out my married life. We started out in a small 2-car garage size house, I guess that would be a tiny house. We started our family there, so I've got experience it was a good start for us, and I can see how this would help future generations. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so now move on to delegations, and we have Ms. Sarah Manchester from President of QP Local 403. Welcome here.
Good afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I present to you today is the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Stolo, and Tsawwassen First Nations. I have had the pleasure of meeting most of you, but for those who I have not, my name is Sarah Manchester. I'm the president of QP Local 403, representing the Township of Langley Municipal Workers. Thank you for allowing me to speak with all of you today. I want to highlight the amazing work QP 403 members do to make our community a better place to live, work, and play. QP 403 represents over 1,200 workers here at the township, with the majority of QP 403 members living in the township. They are your neighbors and citizens who provide a wide variety of services, including lifeguards, swim instructors, fitness instructors, engineering services, parks operations, bylaw enforcement, protective services, water and wastewater services, road maintenance, snow removal, community planning, communications, and many, many, many more. QP 403 members support the community. We are involved with Special Olympics, community food banks, the Royal Canadian Legion, Langley Hospice, the United Way, and local minor sports, to name a few. We are proud of the services we provide for our friends, neighbors, and the community as a whole. As we know, COVID-19 has made us have to put in many special safety protocols to make sure people are able to stay safe as we continue to try and navigate our new normal. I sent out a letter to all members of council earlier this month, as there had been some conversations about looking at privatization options as a tool for saving money. I outlined the harm privatization has caused in other communities and the many long-term negative effects such a move would have on our township's long-term prosperity. Among many other considerations, privatization risks lower quality in services, vastly reduces accountability and democratic control for the community, and fundamentally changes the motive of services from the public good to profit generation. One of the primary responsibilities as a local government is to support and maintain community resilience. During this current pandemic, this equates to ensuring members of our community emerge from this crisis as physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy as possible. Our success with this will be dependent on our ability to alleviate their emotional and physical distress. Fortunately, we have the tools we need to make this happen. Recreation. Never before has it been so clear that our parks and recreation services and infrastructure are essential services and are most needed in times of stress and upheaval. Access to township recreation activities are the most important sources of respite for the miseries of physical and social isolation. Access to physical activity is an unparalleled cure during crisis and a critical mental health resource needed to get through this pandemic. Continued access to recreation is critical for individual and community wellness. They are not discretionary services and will ensure community resilience. The Township Public Recreation Department is in the business of facilitating the health and well-being of our citizens, the health and well-being of our communities, the health and well-being of our places and spaces. You have some amazing recreation programming staff who, at 8 months into this pandemic, are still on layoff. Unfortunately, we are not utilizing their expertise to get creative and provide these essential services to the community. All we ask is that we look at innovative ways to provide safe recreational opportunities for our community members while ensuring good community health, and that we continue to keep these programs publicly run to ensure quality services for all. I thank you for your time today, and I would love to take any questions.
Okay, well, Ms. Manchester, thank you very much, and I know we appreciate the partnership that we have with Local 403 and all the great people that work for the Township of Langley, and I appreciate you bringing your thoughts to Council. I don't have any questions here, and again, thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we move on to reports to Council, and E1 is Council meeting technology. As we know, it's been difficult meeting in Zoom, and there's been requests of how we can come back to some sort of normal, but yet we have to recognize that not everyone can be in the same room. So there is a request to pre-approve $56,286.72. Boy, that's pretty accurate in funding. Must be the IT guys putting this forward. If I could have a motion, please. Councillor Long, second by Councillor Whitmarsh, and I have discussion. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I am absolutely delighted to see this recommendation to move towards the system that Metro Vancouver has in place, which I think is extremely efficient. And not only is it efficient, but it's extremely user-friendly. And so I certainly support that move, and I'm very glad to see it. But I do have a couple of questions. My questions concern the second part, which dissemination of the proceedings of council to the public. Why wouldn't we use the Metro model for that as well? That's question number one. And question number two concerns number three, meeting conduct, web streaming, and system infrastructure. Will we be getting rid of Granicus? Because Granicus has been a problematic system for a long time. It even says in the report that the company was sold in 2014, and since then there's been a lot of issues. I'm sure we've spent a lot of money trying to make Granicus work. I think it's time for us just to say goodbye to it and get rid of it. So I was wondering if I could get an answer to those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So Mr. Backen would be the best to respond to that.
Mr. Sheetmaker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sheetmaker.
Hi, thank you, Worship. Through yourself to Councillor Richter. So regarding number two, essentially we are trying to duplicate what Metro Vancouver currently has in place. We can't use the technology that they have exactly, but ultimately it'll result in the same end user experience. And with respect to number 3, yes, the intent is to completely eliminate the Granicus system from our environment completely.
Oh, that is excellent news. I am so glad to hear that. Granicus has been nothing but a problem, in my opinion, since the day we adopted it. I'm just wondering, how soon will this transition take place?
Assuming that council approves the recommendations in the report, we'll put together a timeline. Some of the work will occur over the holiday break, and then the various different pieces and phases of it will come into play next year.
So we will be off Granicus by when? June of 2021?
I would expect by June of 2021, yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. Facetiously, I'm glad I don't have Granicus shares because, it may be the case that now more and more individuals are getting into a different mindset going forward. Anyways, I did want to thank staff for putting this together. I know it's been a challenge, and I guess I'm looking for a more definitive answer. I'm with Councillor Richter on the delight of returning to some normalcy and having a hybrid model. And I'm hoping, maybe even by January, we might, given, health conditions, etc., but we might be able to consider going forward. So does staff have any sense of how long this might take before the hybrid option can be operationalized?
To actually have the hybrid meetings in place,
Yes.
It's sort of a combination of bits and pieces of all 3 of those phases.
Okay.
Again, subject to council approving the recommendations in the report, we can certainly circle back and provide a more definitive timeline if needed.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up, because I know that this is not within the scope of this specific report. However, I have noted from time to time in speaking to the public that we do have some technological challenges with loss of audio, etc. So I'm hoping that maybe there's funds that would be available in order to more immediately address these problems, because I am concerned that our meetings are taking place and we can't possibly be transparent if people can only see our images on the screen and they lack audio. So that's kind of a comment that if anything can be done in conjunction with that, I think it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Just maybe a quick question through to Mr. Shoemaker. We're to pre-approve $56,286 to implement the proposed technology. What is that over and above what we have? What's in the budget? Like in the budget to have a meeting, we have a certain amount. So is this over and above that, or is this a totally reconfiguration with the money that's already in the budget, plus this is what it's going to cost over and above that? Or
yep, for sure. Through your worship to Councillor Davis. These are one-time expenses to replace obsolete equipment within the Fraser River presentation room, and some of the underlying audiovisual technology that's in place to facilitate the council meetings themselves. So it's a one-time expense.
So in a year from now, if we approve this one-time expense, we'll be able to have a hybrid meeting, but we'll still be able to use the not the obsolete, the new stuff that we have to, like, we'll still be able to. So in 2 years from now, we can still have it's not like we have to just abandon it. We'll use it. It'll just be in place. And if you want to come to the meeting or via technology, or you want to be there in person, it's still that 56,000 you say won't appear in 2022 because we'll have bought the stuff and it's just sitting there waiting to be used.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just if I can interject it, it's a capital expense. It's a cost of putting in the new equipment. But just to be aware that our procedural bylaw and the motion that we have for these sorts of meetings are there until the emergency is over, and then we'd have to look at, if we were to do something different, that would be a change to our procedural bylaw. But right now, it would be in place as long as the emergency is in place.
So this is a very temporary, kind of a temporary thing until the emergency is lifted, and then we have to look at it. But once they lift the emergency, this will still be in place.
It's still there.
We'll be able to use it.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions. And first of all, a comment that I think this is wonderful. I'm very excited that we're moving forward, or at least talking about it. We, of course, have to decide if we're going to move forward. Just a couple of questions. One question through your worship to staff. I noticed in the budget of 56,000 that approximately 40,000 of that was for hybrid meeting support. Is that I understand then would not be equipment purchase, but that would be the cost of staffing to switch over to this web-based program and to make these kinds of changes? That's sort of more of a staffing cost or a contract kind of cost?
No, the hybrid meeting support piece is both labor and equipment costs. There's a bunch of sort of audio visual changes that need to occur with the equipment in the room to support things like noise cancellation and things like that can cause feedback when you have people participating in the meeting physically present in the Fraser River presentation room, as well as participants remotely. So there's a bunch of equipment that's required to eliminate feedback and make sure that everything runs smoothly.
Okay, so how is that different than the equipment that's there? Different from then there's 16,000, which is for the replacement of obsolete and unsupported equipment.
So the hybrid meeting support piece is net new equipment to support the hybrid meeting model. The replacement of the obsolete equipment is just that. Council may not recall, but maybe a couple of months ago we had some issues with the stream, and again it was due to faulty equipment in the room. So we've the teams sort of identified the elements, the existing technology in the room that is at high risk of failure, and that's what that $16,000 addresses.
Okay, so do we have an annual amount of money that we have in our budget for dealing with technology as it relates to that room for meetings? Like we've got replacement here of obsolete equipment, but do we do it annually? Is it an annual item, or is this something that comes up whenever there's a need? It will come as a request to council.
Yeah, we typically try to sort of make an educated guess as to when some of these elements of the room need to be replaced. There is no annual allocation to replace the equipment. We basically try to use it until it's on its last legs, and then we bring it forward to council to fund the replacement of it.
Okay, and last question relates around moving to Microsoft Teams. And so currently we are conducting our online meetings through Zoom. And so am I to understand here that the suggestion is to also move away from Zoom and have our council meetings conducted by Microsoft Teams in the future for the hybrid model, as well as maybe until we go to hybrid, we're fully online. And if so, is there any type of annual cost to being on Teams, or is that just part of a site license that we already have with the township?
Yeah, so the decision to move to Teams is twofold. The first piece is, yes, we already own it. It's part of our existing enterprise technology footprint, so there's no additional cost to leverage it. Whereas with Zoom, there is an ongoing operating cost. The second piece actually relates to privacy. So the privacy legislation right now kind of has a role to play in this as far as where meeting-related data is stored and how it is transmitted over computer networks. Zoom, we are allowed to temporarily use due to a ministerial order that is in place that sort of allows us to bypass some of those controls that are included in the privacy legislation. Microsoft Teams is fully compliant with BC privacy legislation, so once the state of emergency ends, we will not have any sort of ongoing challenges from a legislative perspective to use that technology.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Oh, thanks very much. Well, I'm not so sure I'm ready to jump for joy just yet, but and I thank you for the previous questions from other councillors. That helps to clarify this and that. It was a lot easier when we were at the school board. I used to run the sound. But anyway, the concern I might have before we throw Granicus out the window, what will happen with all of the stuff that most of it, I don't know if all of council uses the electronic agenda, but I've been using it since it came out. It's got its issues, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's stored there. So there'll be some transition issues, I imagine. So can staff just expand a little bit on how we won't hopefully lose all the agendas and stuff that we've had since the term started, because all the notes and so forth. But more important, I think, can staff encourage me that this new system will allow me to search for reports easier, because it is difficult. I have to figure out which agenda was, so 6 months ago, what we discussed, and try and find it there. It is kind of cumbersome to look up reports and look up council decisions. Can there be some better ways to do that with this new system? Is that what staff are? Well, maybe staff can expand on that, Your Worship, please.
Yep. So the new system would provide more robust searching capabilities than what council currently has. So being able to look at both previous agendas as well as all the sort of supporting documents, reports, and memos, etc., that come along with agendas, we would hope would be easier to locate and review should council need to do that.
Okay, well, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson. Your audio is not coming through, so I think it might be an issue with your headset.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I think it's very important because a couple of months ago, I was at Metro Vancouver. They have an excellent system, and I think we're all learning. I haven't been back really since. But I had a presentation to do, and I couldn't understand that nobody was hearing me, and I was hitting the video button instead of the speaker button. So even little special errors you can make. So it's good that everybody follows the rules, but it is an excellent system. And after I got the speaker on, they only gave me 5 minutes, but I had a 25-page report, but we got it done, and it was received very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd just like to follow up on the comments from Councillor Whitmarsh, which I think were very appropriate in terms of the difference between using Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And from my perspective, Metro Vancouver uses Zoom. They use it very effectively for meetings where people are both in the room as well as being online at the same time. So I think the Zoom capabilities are there. I'm not convinced those capabilities are available with Microsoft Teams, excuse me. And I would like to suggest that perhaps what staff could consider doing is talking to Metro Vancouver, as well as talking to other institutions, and I can use this institution based on my personal experience with it, Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And when we first got into the COVID situation where we had to be remote, we were restricted to using Teams because of the privacy issues. KPU has just recently brought Zoom back online, to be able to use in addition to or instead of Microsoft Teams. I do believe that Zoom is a much more functional platform than Teams is, and it's an easier platform to use. So I'm wondering, perhaps through you to Mr. Backen, if our staff could also touch base with both Metro and KPU, perhaps Councillor Whitmarsh at TWU could provide contact as well, as to comparing the advantages of Zoom and Teams. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think staff will be diligent. Look at those other agencies. Also, I could add TransLink Board uses Teams. The Mayor's Council is still using Zoom, but that may be changing. But certainly, I think staff will be looking at that. Is that correct, Mr. Sheetmaker? Look at these other agencies.
Yeah, we've had a number of discussions with Metro Vancouver, and again, based on the functionality that we need to conduct our meetings, we felt Teams was a good fit, but we can certainly go back and take another look at it if need be.
Great, thank you. All right, I don't see any further discussion, so I'll call the question on E1. All those in favor?
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Carries unanimously. Move on to E2. This is TransLink Grant Funding Agreement Adjustments. This is direction to staff to update the operating capital budgets to reflect the changes in TransLink program for 2020. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Councillor Whitmarsh and seconder. Councillor Kunst. Councillor Richter.
Yes, I have some concerns about this report, and perhaps we could get some clarification on it. Basically, my understanding here is that the MRN monies for operations, maintenance, rehabilitation activities such as street cleaning, snow removal, street lights, traffic signals, signs, patching potholes, drainage, and repaving, we're not going to have access to those monies anymore. So I have two questions. Number one, TransLink has been getting monies from other levels of government, so why are they cutting back on these? And number two is, what is the impact of this going to be dollar-wise on our budget? It seems to me, and I'm basing this on the discussions that we've recently had concerning opening the pools, if we reopen the pools, we have to have a certain percentage additional tax increase, which I still don't understand why we would have to increase taxes to reopen facilities that were already there and funded in the budget. Are we going to end up in the same game here with this road situation? Are we going to have to increase taxes in order to continue to provide these services? And if so, how is that going to be justified? Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll start as being on the Mayor's Council, just on the decision which was made early on in the COVID pandemic, when TransLink was faced with huge losses without any hope of any subsidies coming from any level of government. And the decision at the time was they had to make some cuts immediately. And also, these are driven by the province, not, I shouldn't say driven, but the province is certainly recommending for TransLink to look for cuts. And so one of the things they did was they removed the remainder of the funding for the MRN to municipalities. And since then, they've received $644 million grants from the federal and provincial government to assist them in 2020 and 2021. We don't know about 2022, what that'll look like. As far as I understand, 2021, the MRN funding will be reinstated, and I wasn't clear from the report if 2020 MRN funding is just being deferred or if it's been canceled. I know there's some discussion, but Mr. Seffi, I believe, can pick up from there and perhaps answers the other questions that Councillor Richter had. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Yes, thank you for the questions. I guess a couple of points of clarification. As far as the operating, maintenance, and rehabilitation funding is concerned, it is not that we didn't receive any funding. We did receive some funding, but it wasn't all of what we were expecting because of the, as you have outlined, Your Worship, the lack of projected revenues being realized by TransLink. And as far as, I guess, the impact is concerned, it will not, whatever has happened, will not have an impact on the taxation levels in the township, because of the fact that as far as the operating costs are concerned, staff has not expended the funds that would have been otherwise, I guess, anticipated from TransLink, that would have gone to such things as hiring seasonal staff on an auxiliary basis to assist with certain projects. Some paving projects have been deferred or not undertaken. So the bottom line will not have an impact on the general revenue tax rates, Your Worship.
Thank you. One other clarification. The 2020 MRN funding, was that deferred or has that been canceled? I should know the answer, but I didn't quite get it out of the report, and I can't recall exactly. What have you been told by TransLink?
That has been canceled, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. So that's helpful. Mr. Vacan?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to address the original question in terms of recreation centers or any of our facilities, where we're seeing the biggest impact is not in the expenses of the facilities necessarily. Certainly there's some additional costs as to cleaning, but it's the lack of revenue we're seeing in those circumstances. So just as we experienced with TransLink, when TransLink saw its ridership drop and therefore saw its revenue drop, to operate at the levels means we have to raise that revenue somewhere else. And that's what the reference is as to potential shortfalls in revenue, meaning that additional subsidies have to be provided to allow the systems to stay operating at the same level of service.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question through to maybe Mr. Sefi, just to understand what he had just said. What I understood was that there would not be increase to taxation rates as a result of this, but I'm assuming then that there would be a significant reduction in the amount of work being spent on maintenance and rehab of the those 202 kilometers that are in the MRN within our municipal boundaries. So while we might not have a taxation increase, we certainly will see a decrease in the maintenance and rehabilitation of those roads during this time. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Worship. The actual reduction in the previously projected, anticipated operating and maintenance and rehabilitation funding is outlined in the report, and the operating component is over $3 million. So there will be a reduction in the level of service that we can provide.
So just as a follow-up, like a lot of our situations with roads and paving and those sort of things, we can get by with a year of, maybe not doing as much, but there is a cumulative effect when we don't do that. And so I'm wondering if we will see in 2021 or 2022 a significant increase in the amount of maintenance that will have to be done to make up for the work that is not being done in this next year. Would that be a good assumption to make, that there will be an increased cost, but maybe that's delayed for a couple of years?
Your Worship, that would be one way of addressing the shortfall of this year. Another way would be to have, I guess, what might be referred to as a ripple effect to occur, in that we will only be dealing with the most critical projects next year, so as to not have a significant impact on the bottom line, and as such defer the least critical projects further down the road. So if you're looking at a 20-year horizon, then we're only doing what might be possible within the funding envelope that's available, and that may be, say, the 15-year horizon. Or we could, as Councillor Whitmarsh just outlined, have the impact addressed as part of 1 year's budgeting process, such that it still remains a 20-year horizon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a question through your worship to staff. If anyone knows how these decisions are made at Metro, and like if how are these dollars compared to other municipalities that we're getting? Are we sort of getting our fair share? Like who determines which municipalities and what projects are, you know, deemed not, you know, either important or yeah. So just wondering if we're getting the same amount of funding that other municipalities are getting.
We're getting the same amount of cutbacks as the rest of the municipalities.
Yeah.
You can see my smile. But we, the decision for this is made by the board, and it was made during the height of COVID when ridership plummeted to 17%. Funding, gas tax was gone. The money was bleeding out of their horrendous rate, and they had to look for ways to claw back. So in a way, this puts us back a year, but all municipalities were treated equally. And then as far as the funding allocation to municipalities are put in their projects, the requests to TransLink under the MRN, they all do. And I believe it's always oversubscribed. So then they dole the money out equally to all of the municipalities. And so this was a unique year. So they had to make some really hard decisions to make the system work. I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Sefi. Is there anything else you can add?
Yes, Your Worship, just a point of clarification. You were, of course, absolutely correct, but the I guess the way that the money is dispersed, it's equal based on the lane kilometers within each municipality. Right. So while the base, if you will, the base number is the same for all municipalities, the actual dollar amount will vary depending on how many lane kilometers of MRN road exist in the Township of Langley versus somewhere else. So our reduction or revenues, if you will, is based on the 200 odd kilometers of MRN road that we have within the Township of Langley.
Okay, so and just to clarify, you said this money is canceled, that we won't be able to actually get this money back in the future? This is sort of gone forever?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Long?
Just for clarification, I heard something about Metro. This is TransLink. This is not
TransLink. If I said Metro as an error, it's TransLink MRN.
Okay. And when you say board, it's a TransLink board, yeah.
TransLink board makes that decision.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't see any other discussion, so I'll call the question on E2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries unanimously. Thank you. And Councillor Woodward, E3.
Clear conflict of interest, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Bowers, well aware of the reason.
Thank you. Okay, it's the North Line Truck Route Assessment and Functional Design. This motion is to receive. In my discussions with Mr. Backen, it would be advisable if we could do a receive and refer to the budget for 2021. Councillor Davis moves that as amended there, and Councillor Arneson seconds it. Is there any discussion? Councillor Davis?
Yes. Okay. It's quite a good report. Just one. I had 2 or 3 comments. One is the rail pass going to be at the over rail pass? Is that going to be a problem in the next 2, 4, 8, 10 years? Does anybody know? I guess.
Is that the one on Rawlston? On Rawlston? Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Sefi?
Thank you, Worship. I guess I will ask for some clarification in terms of is it going to be a problem. This report is focused on the improvements that are necessary as required by TransLink.
Yeah, okay.
Township of Langley amend its truck route network to eliminate sections and to add other sections.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but we're eliminating other sections and putting it right underneath that rail crossing. And the next thing is that rail crossing will be no good. And I just wondered, I know that the report doesn't, it's not in the report, but that's what worries me. It's not in the report. Because if you start sending all the trucks through there, then that'll become a problem somehow that somebody's overlooked. And I know that it's really hard to deal with the railroad because they're there now, and can we go lower? All you gotta do is have one. Look at Glover. and number one highway. You know, overpasses are with railroads on them are extremely hard to deal with. It doesn't say anything in here about that. It's just a comment. First thing I thought about is, hey, and you know, because it's actually costing us an awful lot of money to let Fort Langley not have trucks on Glover Road. And the other, it says here, we've got, I'm just concerned about what future years budgets following the following funding, because half of the funding, well, maybe just a little over than half the funding does not come from DCCs. Correct me if I'm wrong. It'll come from potential borrowing costs. So it says here 8.2 million potentially from borrowing costs eligible. Okay. So my concern is, and then it says in another paragraph, following which funding could be excluded in the future year's budgets for consideration, including non-DCC sources. But it says, oh, brother, I was looking right at it. In future years. So we're going to have to borrow maybe $8 million in future years' budgets. And we're going to have to borrow it. So what does future years mean? Because in the report, and it's a good report, like I think it is, like it's a good report, it doesn't actually it says it prioritizes what needs to be fixed, but it doesn't prioritize them in an order. So are we going to go right out and tomorrow we're going to borrow this money and we're going to get the trucks out of Fort Langley and now we're going to put $8 or $15 million into it? I don't think so. I think we're going to slowly, in the next 2, 4, 8 years, address this problem. I would think that would happen. And what are we going to do? Like, it doesn't prioritize. The report doesn't prioritize. Hey, the first thing we need to do is this intersection. The second intersection is this. So that's. I'm just concerned that. You know, Mayor Froese and Councillor Long said that it's just for receipt.
No, it's actually for receipt and to refer to the budget. So just to maybe help clarify, once we get to the budget, then staff would come back with the funding mechanisms and the time period. So as you say, when's it going to happen? It could be over several years that this would occur, and we may be putting money aside. Or, you know, there's different ways, but staff will come back. That's why we refer to the budget. They'll come back with some scenarios that council can then be more informed to make a decision.
In the recommendations, it doesn't say come back. It just,
no, I added that when I, sorry, maybe if you didn't hear, when I asked for the motion, I said to receive it and to refer to the budget for 2021. That was the motion I asked for, and I know you moved it. So if you weren't clear on that, I'd certainly be happy to. Yeah, because I did say
since Thursday I've been looking at this, and all of a sudden you. Okay, I get it.
I think it maybe would have been better if it was in, but in my discussions today, you know, the staff looking for some direction.
Okay, that's perfect.
Certainly the next piece
I'll
of the
support
direction.
that, because if it comes back and they're looking for direction, then that's perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Problem solved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions around this, and I guess the first question I have to ask is if TransLink's getting out of the MRN road business, why do we need their approval on this? So that would be question number one. Question number two is how much has been put into contingency on this particular, for these particular projects? And question number three is if the route from 88th to Ralston and 232nd is already approved and functioning, why do we need alternates? And question number four is, it talks about sending this to the stakeholders, but it seems to me there's a very important stakeholder, which is the public, and they aren't specifically referenced here. And while I don't object to sending this to budget, I do believe we should send it to the public before we send it to budget. So
Mr.
those
Seffi?
are my questions.
Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess this is a matter of a policy consideration for council staff is simply providing the implications, including financial implications, and looks for council to provide staff with the direction. I do have Mr. Cordero online, on standby, if you will, and he's assured me that the overpass that was referenced by Councillor Davis earlier was looked at previously a number of years ago and has been considered to be, or determined to be, of adequate height, and there are no improvements required to that particular overpass. As far as, I guess, the other questions being raised by Councillor Richter, in terms of, I guess, the first question, is TransLink really in a position to provide direction if they're getting out of MRN? I think that is potentially a question for, I guess, TransLink to consider. I don't know if the current circumstance is one that is going to determine the future, I guess, direction of the regulations under which TransLink is operating. And specifically in terms of next steps, as I said, if council wishes us to take a step in terms of public consultation, certainly that's something that we can do. All we're outlining at this point for council are the various implications. This cost estimate is a very high level estimate. It is not based on a detailed design. It is simply a functional design. It is a level of design that engineers undertake to make sure that something is actually workable conceptually. And as such, it has a significant level of contingency built within it, which is what we call a Class D, which is 40% contingency. So we want to make sure that we are on the same page as council in terms of what council wishes to see in terms of next steps, because each step will then add additional, I guess, cost implications and staff resource implications. And we want to make sure that we are on the same page as council as far as what would be the direction to go for with respect to, say, for example, environmental assessment, or in terms of the ALR implications, land acquisition issues. All of these things will require, I guess, the next step, and public consultation will be part and parcel of that.
So if I could get clarification on the contingency. So it's 40%, but is it 40% of what? 15 million or 8 million?
Well, thank you for the clarification, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Richter. It is plus or minus 40% of what it is that we estimate the actual cost to be. So it has, if you will, as I said, a contingency level of 40% added to it, but it could be less or above.
Okay, but is it 40% of 15 or 40% of 8 million?
No, 40% has already been incorporated with the 8 million plus 40%.
8 million plus the 40%. 40% seems awfully high as a contingency.
But it is, Councillor, I apologize for interrupting, but it is best practice as far as a Class D estimate is concerned, or as far as a Class D estimating process is concerned, because as I said, there is no specificity in terms of, for example, right of way that would be required to actually implement some of these improvements. It is very rough in terms of what is the actual area, and it's very rough in terms of what could be expected to be required, as opposed to something that might be negotiated with a particular property owner.
Okay, well, I would like to flag the 40% contingency when it gets to budget, and I'll just put that notice up here now. The second thing is, Mr. Mayor, I would like to put an amendment forward, and perhaps you want to hear from the other speakers before I put the amendment forward, but I want this taken to the public before it goes to budget.
Okay. Mr. Backen had some comments. Maybe we can hear from Mr. Backen first.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Just to echo Mr. Seffi's comments on the classification, a Class D, I guess, analysis or estimate is that it's very broad and is intended just to serve as a jumping off point. My primary input was going to be as to public consultation. I think it's certainly necessary, but I would caution against sending it to the public too early. And I say that because council hasn't seen the totality of the budget yet, the priorities and whatnot. And to send it to the public would suggest this matter is under active consideration. I think that decision might be premature. I think we need to actually look at the totality of the budget and the capital program and see if after that it is seriously something council wishes to consider, because it may be, or it may be something they may wish to consider a number of years out, which would change the nature of the consultation, or may be something that would be deferred indefinitely depending upon some of the other challenges the council's facing. So I just wanted to add that before we go forward with setting any timelines at this point.
Well, if I could make a comment here, Mr. Mayor, this seems to me the wrong way to be looking at it. The public has indicated to us on several occasions that getting the trucks out of Fort Langley is a priority to them. We've also heard back from the public on 216th Street and 88th Avenue that they don't necessarily want the trucks there. We haven't heard anything yet from the people who live on 232nd. Maybe they're not aware of this. I don't think this is a project we should send a budget to kill. I think this is a project we have to actively understand and actively pursue. And I think the public needs to be aware that this is on our radar and we want to do it now. We don't want to push it off into the budget where it's not going to get funded for whatever reasons. So again, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make the motion, the amendment motion, that we also send it for public consultation before it goes to budget. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that, and then I'll speak to that also. Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, I guess those last comments really may change my comments. I mean, I don't know. Okay, you know, sure, send everything to public, and you know what the answer is going to be. But anyway, I'm certainly glad that Councillor Davis had a shot at this before me, because I didn't want to say that this was very expensive and it may not get done right away, but that's the reality. So I'm not sure where we're heading, but other than in that direction. When council first heard about this, or this has been considered for so many years, it was a few million, some million, maybe 5 million. Maybe. This is huge. This is 15 million, and who knows? As Mr. Safey is saying, when you got all these land acquisitions, the price of land and everything else, and all the different factors. So it is a massive, massive project, and I don't know how we can afford it. And as, of course, Councillor Richter has said, we don't know if all the unintended consequences of redirecting traffic and so forth. So I guess all I wanted to say was my absolute shock at the amount of money involved here. And, is it worth it? Well, I don't want to go there because I don't want Fort Langley to take me out behind the barn. But it is a very serious project. So I guess what I did want to maybe ask is, will the traffic, at some point, wane a little bit in the air? Is there a peak now that's causing all this concern? And I say that a little bit facetiously because I noticed in our correspondence there was an approval, I think, of a lumberyard down on 88th. I don't know, so I guess I'm really answering my own question, but staff, it's always better if staff speaks to this, that there's going to be a need, not only now, as we've heard from the public, we don't want to see the trucks going through the village, but it's not going to get any better in the future. Is that why staff, is that the opinion that staff would have?
So, Steffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the way that the report has been prepared by an external qualified engineering professional that was engaged by the township was based on current and projected future revenue growth projections based on the OCP. And that kind of projects the traffic volume, the truck volume accordingly. So that's as far as the question Councillor Long has posed. But going back to, I guess, a couple of previous comments, Your Worship, in terms of the costs, well, also raised by Councillor Long, if I could just provide an additional clarification. Now, this report, including the estimate, was provided by the consultant. Staff wanted to make sure that council and the public sees the entirety of the consultant's findings, which, as I said, is based on technical factors and technical considerations. That said, as an example, the consultants were not aware that we have a $1.5 million budget allocation already set aside for one of the intersection improvements, that being a Glover at Rollison. Now, if you deduct $1.5 million, then you'll be left with 14.1. Then the other, I guess, aspect is what Councillor Richter was referencing earlier, which is to do with the contingency. Now, the 40% contingency has been added to the construction cost of approximately $8 million. So arguably, one could apply a lower level of contingency for the construction, and maybe even a higher one for the land acquisition and for other administrative type of work, such as engineering, detailed analysis. So depending on the level of comfort of council and staff, that number could range from 8 million to say 10 million or $12 million. So, again, one final thing on the cost is the fact that the previous estimates, even though they were presented as part of the overall North Langley truck route improvements, only looked at one intersection in particular, which was believed to be the most serious, I guess, area needing attention, but did not include the entirety of the corridor. And then finally, Your Worship, one last comment that I think Councillor Davis was referencing was, well, what portion is it attributable to general revenue as opposed to DCCs? And what staff has determined is approximately $6 million, give or take, is potentially attributable to growth, which is not currently part of the DCC program. So again, subject to council direction, there would be a need for an amendment to the current DCC bylaw that would allow staff to include those projects in the DCC program, with about $7 million remaining that has to be funded through other non-DCC sources.
Well, thanks, Your Worship, for that clarification. So I guess it's really good that we're flushing this out at this point so that the public's expectations can be slightly tempered. I don't think we have to worry too much about public consultation, because my email just went off and the Fort Langley Community Association have sent out a blast about this very project. So the public are being briefed. And as far as I'm concerned, when we first submitted the budget, that is also going to public consultation. It's not necessarily a place to send things to die. So I'm going to support the staff's recommendation, and I'm not going to support any amendments. But I'm glad that the discussions happened, that the public understand the magnitude of this project, and hopefully we can pick it off piece by piece and get it accomplished sometime soon. Thank you.
Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And it's interesting to hear the different perspectives of something that's historically been quite a challenge in the township. I just want to refer back to Mr. Safey's comments, because having read the report, I wanted maybe some further clarification regarding the opportunity, if council were to so choose, to amend our DCC bylaw for the purpose of adding some of these costs overall, so that we wouldn't have to borrow. So I thought it was important to address that as maybe what kind of timeline or how that could be integrated into our approach if we did decide at a budget meeting that we wish to move this forward.
Mr. Safey, with that information, do you have the information now, or would that be coming back when we review this?
Your Worship, it wouldn't be done now at this point. Well, I guess I will await the outcome of council's deliberations at this point, and depending on the ultimate direction, we may have to come back to council seeking additional direction with respect to either including the project in the DCC program, or including as part of the 2021 budget, or otherwise.
Thank you for the clarification, because to me that's critically important to know, because when you're looking at a very large budget number, especially with COVID-19 financial repercussions, it for me makes a difference between a non-starter and one that has possibilities over maybe a few years. And I would just like to direct council back to the fact that this has been an ongoing situation. And to me, not to prefer one community or one route over another, but it seems like that that downtown corridor in Fort Langley has borne the burden of having a truck route going through there for quite some time without any real benefit to them financially. So I think it's a good thing to move forward with this, and I will be supporting this going through to the budget process, because I think that we need to do something concrete to take a step forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, do you want to deal with this motion, and then I can put on a subsequent motion, which is to send it for public input prior to it being sent to budget? The issue
you could
I
do
have
it as an amendment if you wish, because it is to refer to budget. It is to receive and refer to budget, but if you wish to add that as an amendment, that might be appropriate.
Okay. And further, then my amendment would be, and further, that this matter be taken for taken to public consultation prior to it reaching the budget, the 2021 budget discussions.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Arneson seconds. Okay, I'll speak to it. I was listening to staff, and I agree with staff. I think this is a bit premature. I think we should take it to budget and see which direction council wants to go. Certainly there are alternatives, and if we're going to be proceeding with some good information, I'd rather take the better information to the public than preliminary when council really hasn't made a decision yet. We're just referring this, and we have a lot of work to do before we get to a point where we can take it to public. So although I understand, and I think it'll be a time this has to go for some more public consultation, I just feel it's premature at this time, so I won't be supporting it, but thank you for that at this time. Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Ferguson, you're not coming through. There you go.
You're gonna have to take those back to Radio Shack, Fergie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Okay, so basically, I mean, I understand the merit of the motion. We're often being criticized for not having the right information prior to going to the budget. And you'd hate to see the public having more information themselves. I'm 100% in favor of the public having information at the appropriate time. And I do respect the fact that council wants to see this get in the hands of the public. Did I say republic? I meant public. So I think at this point in time, it's a little bit premature, but it will come sooner than later. And we also did know, I didn't speak to the main motion, but you'll forgive me. We did know this was going to be a big budget item. It was being a challenge, and that we are really going to have to roll up our sleeves and find a solution to this problem, because as far as I know, they've been talking about truck routes in Fort Langley for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Sorry. On the amendment, right?
Yes.
Yes, the amendment, like, I am absolutely in favor of giving more information, and I absolutely agree with getting the public on. But I think Fort Langley, the Fort Langley truck route has had a lot of information. I mean, like Councillor Long said, all of a sudden we get an email when we're talking about it. I think a couple comments on the amendment is if we put it to public, Fort Langley they're very passionate, they're very organized, and I just don't know, because if this even goes, if we do like one intersection or two intersections a year, this could take 8 years, and there's no way on earth that we can put a budget together to say how much it's going to cost us in 8 years to buy a sliver of land and make it wider for a B train and that sort of thing. And actually there are some underlying things that maybe, like Councillor Long brought up, a sawmill on River Road. They've got that other piece of property, and they told us that if they had that other piece of property, they'd load the stuff on a truck, drive it 700 meters, 700 feet down the road. It doesn't have to go out the truck to get sawed or refurbished or whatever they do. They can do it. So if we're not going to borrow the 15, or if we're not going to do it, it's going to be done in phases. So I'm just wondering if this is one of the times. And like I say, Councillor Richter, I totally support more vision, but that may like, you know, every town has its, I mean, Alder Grove is Fraser Highway. People never even stop in Fraser High. Milner has Glover Road. Milner has the coal train. These things never even stop. So Fort Langley has a truck route right now, but if we, I'm just wondering if maybe I'm making this too long and drawn out. I got a feeling I am, but I think I'll support it to go to public, but I just reconsider what are we going to get into if we send it to them. They'll just want it out now. Just now, it's got to go out, and we won't have a game plan for the 8 million or 16 million that we have planned to do that. And I just wonder if this goes to council, if this goes to staff and comes back to us, maybe in a month or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe we'll have a better understanding and a better way to make a better plan, a fiscal plan. Because I know we want to get it to budget, but we can't take it to budget if we don't know what the details are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Richter.
Mr. Mayor, there are other people there. Well, okay, I'll just speak.
Yeah, you didn't really speak to it. You made the motion. I apologize. Should have given you the opportunity to speak first. So
oh, okay. Thank you very much. I just want to say, this idea of sending it to the public as part of the budget is fruitless because the budget is huge. We know that. We go through it every year, and the devil's in the details, and we can't expect the public to pour through all the details. What this council needs to have is direction from the public about what their priorities are before we get to the budget table. And that's what this is doing. We have a community, Fort Langley, saying, get the trucks out. They've been saying this for years. We've talked about it. We've asked for reports. The reports have come. Now we have the price tag. All of the public needs to understand the price tag and the potential implications for other areas of the community. And we as council, if we are doing our job in listening to the public about their priorities, then we have to take this to them before it gets to the budget table. Otherwise, it's going to get lost in the details. And what's going to be more important? Will a new pool in Fort Langley be more important? Will a new intersection at 216th and Glover be more important? There's so many priorities that we have, but we don't have a firm handle, in my opinion, on how important this priority is to the public. And I think we need to get that handle so that we know when we get to the budget table exactly where we stand with the public. So I urge council to please support this amendment. It needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I certainly understand the need to go to the public. I just feel like council needs to work through the strategy a little bit more around what's funded by DCCs, what's not, how we can make this work. I think we've heard lots of information from the Fort Langley Community Association, and they've done survey after survey, so we've had lots of information from them. I think we have enough to be able to make some initial kinds of thinking and then to take it back to the public. So I feel like I certainly understand Councillor Richter's suggestion of going to the public, and I understand the need to do that, and we will do that. I just think it feels a little bit premature for me, and I would rather move it to the budget process. There's opportunity for public feedback there, and we will continue to have more public feedback as we move along. This is a very high price ticket item. It's not something that's going to be decided quickly. It's not something that's decided just by a council without public input. We'll need a lot of public input, but I think we need to just wait a bit.
Thank you. Councilor Long.
Yeah, I'm just trying to take some deep breaths here. I mean, good grief, this is a public meeting. It's almost as if this motion is that, well, if we don't pass this motion, we're holding something back from the public or we're leaving the public out. We're elected by the public to make some decisions. And the budget, as has been mentioned, is huge. How can you possibly put one item out here and one item out there? To me, that circumvents the whole process. And that's not a very kind word, in my opinion. When, you know, we don't want to circumvent the process. I think we have to understand how big of a pie we have here and how big of a township and how we're going to have to divvy up that pie and make sure everybody gets served. There are lots of details to be worked out, and it really troubles me when we sort of, you know, I mean, I'm bad for micromanaging, I know, but, you know, staff have a plan. We need to go to stakeholders. We need to get a lot of work done. And of course, the public is along for the ride all the way. Emails just arrived from the community association. The media are out there. They're going to be reporting on this, the challenges that we have. And yeah, we're also going to be promising them a pool by the sounds of things, because that went out to the public. And who's going to say no to a pool, by the way? So there are massive amounts of challenges. Don't circumvent the budget process. I think that is the most public part of our job when it comes to spending tax dollars. And if we're not doing a proper job there, then let's work harder at making sure that that budget is more understandable, more presentable, and everything goes out to the public and gets some comment on. The other thing is, I believe we're going to start budget discussions in the next few weeks. So how this might just stall the whole thing. We're going to go out for public consultation. How do you do that with COVID, by the way? So that's a challenge. But I mean, if we're going to start budget discussions very soon, the motion as it stands before it was amended means, hey, let's get at it. So I don't support any amendments. I think we should send it to the budget process and give it its due diligence there. And if there's a concern that the public have not all the information it needs, well, let's work harder on making sure that they do. And my post is lighting up like crazy on Facebook as we speak. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I supported this amendment because I won't belabor the point too much from my point of view, but I feel like, especially with a very big and potentially divisive issue like that, it would be fundamentally reasonable and sound to go forward and just to elicit some more information. Irrespective of whether or not we think it's too soon, we are going to get public feedback from this process. And I would much rather have it through a public engagement process during COVID, whatever that looks like, rather than to have this piecemeal approach where people are concerned and you know, wondering why is it that they, from their point of view, were not considered in a draft strategy. So I think it would be helpful for us to make that decision, because in the end, it could be something that we decide, you know, the public, for whatever reason, balancing the interests, we decide not to go forward. I could not possibly know that, but I would appreciate, since we have an engagement charter, to take that focus and do it first, because I don't know that there are any rules that are hard and fast that say when to go to the public. And I think it's fair, especially in this case, to go to the public first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, what would that public consultation look like at this point with COVID, and compared to if we waited to do it during the budget process?
Mr. Backen, do you have any thoughts on
that? Your Worship, I think one of the challenges that we're going to discuss through the budget is how that process looks as we go forward. There are a number of constraints we're facing. Right now, of course, even when we're regarding public hearings, we're trying to accept written submissions. So at this point, subject to additional timing, I think we would be able to do some sort of public consultation, but it would most likely be in the written form unless council directed otherwise. Of course, recognizing we're in a situation where public gatherings are not presently, I guess, permitted or strongly advised against.
One other question: if we did this public consultation now, would that then would we not then do it at, you know, around the budget time as well, or would we have two?
Your Worship, the challenge we're going to face is we hope to start the budget process later this month. I think there would be the potential to elicit written communications, I guess, concurrent with that process, or to ensure that that was going on during the process. Of course, the process is mandated to end by the end of April, but we would hope to have something in place by, say, March, to be realistic. So there is a potential to run concurrently if it's to be written submissions, and that's something that I think could be done, recognizing the limitations of timing and the COVID season.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I disagree with Councillor Long's comments. Basically, if we bury this in a budget public consultation, we are circumventing the process, because we're just saying, well, we've got so many different priorities, we don't know how important your priority is. And that's what I'm saying is wrong about this. We need to ask how important this priority is, and not just ask it of Fort Langley, because we know it's pretty important to Fort Langley, but also to the other areas that are going to be impacted by the decision to reroute these trucks through their areas. Now, in terms of putting it on social, putting it into the public realm, why can't we just simply post this report tomorrow on the township website and say, please give us comments. Anyone who lives in Langley, give us comments on this by, I don't know, January 1st, perhaps? Because if we're not starting the budget process until later this month, and then there's the Christmas season, which probably isn't going to be much of a Christmas season because of the COVID, we won't get into the nitty-gritty discussions until January anyway. So if we have some input on this, and it will probably have to be written format simply because of what's happening with COVID right now, but I think everybody understands that. And then the other comment I would just like to make around this is Councillor Ong did mention that his Facebook is lighting up. Don't we have a part of our procedure bylaw that prohibits us from being on social media?
No, we don't.
During a council meeting?
Actually,
I thought that was passed in an earlier council.
Yeah. Your worship, it was an email.
It pop up. Excuse if I can say, I know that my watch will pop stuff up. We have so many ways that things pop up. Doesn't mean that we're following it. So I don't think.
Okay. Well, I just wanted that clarification because council was quite adamant back in the day about us not being on social media during a council meeting. So again, to go back to my point, this is not a difficult thing to do. It's an easy thing to do. Just put it up on the Facebooks or on the web page, ask for input, letters, emails, tasks, whatever. Ask for it by January 1st and it's done. And then we have a clearer understanding when we go into the nitty-gritty discussions about how far forward or how far back this project has to go. Thank you.
I think I'm going to call a question. We've had a good discussion on this. Basically, it's you know, I think.
Your worship.
Okay, Council Long, go ahead, and I'll just have my final word.
Okay, because it's a different motion now. I mean, if you want,
it's an amendment. It's just an amendment to go to the public health.
No. It's slightly different what the mover just said. If you want to, what's the word? Do it at the same time. Put it on the website. That's different than going before the budget. So if it wants to happen simultaneously, that's a different motion, I think. So perhaps we can hear the motion.
No. There's one, Council. There's one motion on the floor. It's the amendment to take this to the public, and all Council Richter did was made some suggestions to staff. It's not a motion. So,
well, I thought the motion was to take it.
The motion is to go to the public prior to coming to the budget. That's the amendment.
That's it.
Yeah. So basically, I've heard great conversation. I think this kind of split. I think again we don't have enough information. I've heard a lot of public engagement on this over the years. I think from the minute I was elected, they want to get the trucks out of Fort Langley. I don't think that'll change, but we do need. Obviously, there's more detailed work that has to be done before. I don't think it's complete enough to take to the public. So, but I think at one point it will be, and it may be that council decide to, because of COVID, the funding isn't there, but not to lose sight of it. It goes to the budget process, so we get more information. We may want to defer to the next year. There's a lot of things council can do with it. They may want to take it for public consultation and then discuss it in the 2022 budget. But this is a big ticket item. I think we do need to tread carefully, follow our procedures and our process we've done in the past, but not eliminate the public. But this is not the time. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment and opposed? So Councillor Long, Mayor Froese, Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Whitmarsh, and Councillor Kunst opposed. The amendment fails. Back to the main motion as amended. So speakers on that, I did have a list here someplace. Here we go. Councillor Richter, your hand is up. So you spoke once, but the second time was to make the amendment. So you can speak a second time on the main motion.
Okay, I'm going to reluctantly support this motion. I don't agree that it should go to the budget without having more comprehensive public input. But at least if it goes to the budget, we should be talking about it this year. But I do want to warn the people in Fort Langley that just because we're talking about it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It could get buried into future years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. You just said we're going to vote on the question as amended.
No.
No.
Oh, sorry. Did I say that? That was a mistake. I did say that.
Okay, so it's no amendment. Okay.
The motion. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for waking me up.
No,
I do. That's all good. Okay. This is the vote on the motion as not amended. How's that? All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Could we ask Councillor Woodward to come back, please? Good discussion. Thank you, Council. I think there's lots of work to do on this one. Councillor Woodward's back. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to bylaws for first and second reading. F1 is rezoning application number 100517 and development permit applications number 100985 and 101146, Mitchell Latimer, 7677 Incorporated, bylaw 5648. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, seconder.
So move.
Second. Could I have a second? Councillor Long, discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Councillor Arneson, you opposed? Okay, Councillor Arneson opposed. The motion carries. Move on to F2. Official Community Plan Amendment and Rezoning Application number 100204 and Development Permit Application number 101144, Langley Memorial Hospital Foundation, bylaw number 5660, 5661, and bylaw 5662. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, seconder. Councillor Kuntz, discussion. Councillor Richter. Councillor Richter, you're
my God, yes. Yeah. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate that. I just want to say I'm very supportive of this idea. I think it's wonderful that we're looking at putting seniors housing close to the hospital, and I'm very happy that a large percentage of that, or a relatively large percentage of that, will be affordable housing at below market. However, I'm very concerned about the design of this building. It's, in my opinion, a very ugly building, yes. Like really ugly. And it just looks like a concrete block. And just this past week, for example, in Russia, there was one of these concrete block buildings that had a piece of it fall off and take out somebody's car. So I'm going to vote to take this to rezoning, but I believe that when we deal with the development permit, we have to talk about the form and character, because this stalag stuff is just not acceptable in my opinion. Thank you.
I was muted and talking. You never know I'm talking because I have a mask. I love this. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. And thank you, Councillor Richter, for confirming what is my view a problem. And I was reluctant just because of the nature of this application, which I'm very supportive of, but I was very disappointed when I looked at the renderings. And it seems to me part of the rationale that was put forward is that they were trying to tie a portion of the exterior to the new addition to the emergency wing of the hospital. But I would rather look at all the other very attractive and aesthetic buildings that are around there where people live. So I just put it down to, if you are going to put individuals there, and a portion of them are going to be in affordable housing, which is exactly what we want, we need to consider that people shouldn't be stigmatized by living in a building that looks like an institution. So when I looked at that building, I thought, we're giving them, and rightfully so, lots of different waiving of fees, etc. And I would prefer that in form and character, it went back and there was some design amendments to not make it look like I think what the term they use is a brutalist kind of building. So those are just my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, of course I like it. You know, okay, maybe the color could be changed, but I'm not sure why we're discussing this now. But well, you know, maybe we need to. But I mean, if you look at the window designs and stuff, I think it's got a lot of positive features to it as well. Maybe the color is a little bit off. But anyway, we're going to send it to public hearing, I hope, and because it has so many other very positive aspects to the project. I just wanted to ask, when it talked about, and this is not exclusive to this application, but it constantly talks about, when we see these developments, that the public information meetings, because of COVID, have been relaxed and canceled. Can't they be done online? Can't there be websites set up where the public can comment, like we just heard here from other councillors, on some of the benefits or aspects of the project? Because without the public information meetings, we are missing a significant part of the public feedback, which we've talked all about already this meeting. So can staff answer if this could not be done in a way that would be even perhaps as effective, if not more effective, perhaps, than a public information meeting in person, where boards can be shared and comments can be made by the public?
Mr. Safi.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, it can be done. As Councillor Long referenced, staff is aware of cases where proponents of a development application have elected to proceed with some kind of a meeting that would involve members of the public. It creates such a scenario, could potentially create some logistical challenges, such as, I guess, the ability of staff to verify the authenticity of some of the comments or feedback being received, making sure that there's a sign-up sheet. All of these things that we typically have with an in-person meeting may not be easily achievable in a virtual format. But as a concept, certainly is something that can be done, as we have seen other people or some examples of it already in the Township of Langley.
Well, thanks for that, and I understand that completely. So there are some challenges, but I wonder also, over the years, I wonder if the color is correct or the angles are as good as they could be in what's in our package. Because if you look on F2 page 8, there's sort of two shades of gray here on the internal courtyard and the southeast perspective. So perhaps I could encourage, if this passes, that the proponent do a nicer job of presenting how wonderful a building they're planning to build, so that we can see that when the public hearing happens. Thank you, if it happens.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Sorry, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were finished. Yeah.
And I was, but I just forgot this point. Is there going to be a public hearing, or there does need to be? I know that we're confused with which ones require action.
Yes, there will be. Yes, on this one there will be, because of this OCP amendment. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, well, hopefully some better renderings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question, through your worship, to staff. Is the intention of this building to be a building that is owned by the Langley Memorial Hospital Foundation? They would own this and then be the landlords and rent out the suites and so on?
Your Worship, thank you for the question. Staff's understanding is that the entirety of the units will be rental, and it will be operated by a nonprofit organization that has already been established, that is intended to have an office within the building. That is a requirement for various funding and I guess waiving of certain fees, requirements that are legislated, and as such the proponents have established a nonprofit to make sure that they're able to take advantage of the economic incentives.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And I certainly am very supportive of the project. I think, it's a really wonderful idea and it's a great location for it. But I do hold the same views as Councillor Arneson and Councillor Richter. I think at least the drawings themselves are not very helpful. And I think that if it looks like the drawings, comes out in the drawings, I would be quite disappointed. So I do think that's something that's going to have to be thought through as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. And I want to echo a lot of the comments. I think this is probably one of the better projects. I want to highlight too that one of the things that's been done in regards to the shape of the building and the location of the footprint to preserve a lot of the mature trees at the rear is something that we should also be supportive of. We don't see that very often. I just want to highlight, I would hope to see the rezoning proceed regardless of the concerns around the development permit. So at least the proponent entity can get some certainty around the acceptability of the requested parking variances and the other aspects of the building, such as the unit count and the restrictions for seniors rental, which I read in the last few weeks is something we desperately need here in the Township of Langley. So I'd like to support all those elements separate from the discussion around the development permit, which we can review at third. Now, I think it is appropriate to discuss that now, to give the proponent a heads up that there are concerns and to bring some rationale and some discussion and maybe some additional documentation to the public hearing, get that to us prior to the conclusion of the public hearing to try to justify the design. I didn't take a lot of look at the design. I'll do that now. Leading up to the public hearing, I actually would prefer that we not build the same building in Langley over and over and over again. We drive around and a lot of the townhouses and the single family homes are all the same, very similar cookie cutter development over and over and over again. I would hate to punish someone who comes forward with an alternative design simply because it doesn't look like everything else that we see. I believe the intent is to have it match the growing modern aspect of a hospital campus, which is going to change over a number of years. So if we think of this building lasting for some number of decades, potentially up to 75 years, if it's a quality building, presumably the Langley Memorial Hospital Foundation campus will change a lot. And the design of a hospital campus is more of a modern feel. This would be directly across the street from the residential care expansion. It's kitty corner to the new emergency room expansion that's under construction now, which are all going to be and are modern looking buildings. So I think this would fit in well where maybe it doesn't fit in or wouldn't be acceptable in some other parts of the township or other areas of Murrayville. So I'll leave it there, and I hope the proponent is aware of these concerns and we'll bring some of that rationale to the public hearing. But overall, certainly support the project and look forward to it going ahead. Thanks.
Thank you. I think through the magic world of Zoom, I see the proponent, the architect, and everybody else busy taking notes down right now, if I can imagine that. I think that's what's happening. Councilor Ferguson.
Yes, it's certainly an opportunity for us to look at this thing. I know that the Hospital Foundation had been working for quite a while on doing something like this. Number one, affordable. Number two, rental, seniors, opportunity for very close to the hospital and very close to the hospital areas. And it's a win-win. I agree with others have said before that we need to work on the win-wins first, and then on the development permit, if there's a need for colors or some changes aesthetically, perhaps that's the time in a development permit. But I think it's an opportunity for council and the community to come together for something that most of us believe is an important thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Richter.
Yes, and again, I just want to say I love the idea. I particularly appreciate very much the saving of the trees. I mean, this gets A+ marks in my book, but it just needs to look better, I think, and matching what the hospital's doing. I'm not sure that's such a great reason to build a building for seniors that looks so stark, but like I said, I'll support this going through to the public hearing, and we can talk about the DP on the other side. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Move on to bylaws for final adoption. This is I1, official community plan amendment and rezoning application number 100177. I'll go for the bylaws first. Bylaw 5528, 5529, 5530, 5531. Could I have a motion, please? Councilor Davis, second by Councilor Whitmarsh. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Carries unanimously. Now the development permit application number 101023. Could I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Councilor Whitmarsh, second by Councilor Davis. Discussion. Seeing none. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Everyone's in favor? Okay. Carries unanimously. Thank you. And move on to correspondence and a motion to receive the letter from BLG law firm of November 20th, 2020. Could I have a motion to receive? Councilor Arneson, seconder. Councilor Kunst, discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Unanimously. Move on to minutes of committees. The Heritage Advisory Committee of November the 4th. Motion to receive the minutes. Motion, please. Councilor Long, seconder. Councilor Kunst. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. And move on to the Mayor and Council report. Highlight of the night, I'm sure, or afternoon. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. We all know that I'll just wait for a minute while Ms. Bauer puts up the slides. All right, Remembrance Day was recognized on November the 11th throughout our communities. Although smaller groups were in attendance this year, Aldergrove, Fort Langley, Murrayville, and the City of Langley all provided streaming. And it was a significant appreciation to those who lost their lives fighting for our freedoms. I want to thank all the volunteers who ensured these remembrances took place and that safety protocols were established. I was fortunate enough to attend the one in Murrayville, and there were distancing and great remembrance, but a very small group than what we were used to. But I know a lot of people watched it online. So I want to thank everybody who participated either virtually or in person. As you may be aware, Kevin Desmond, Translink CO, has given his notice of resignation and will be leaving in February 2021. He'll be greatly missed by the region. Kevin's work was instrumental in ensuring the region and local municipalities created their long-term transportation vision and also took steps to achieve it. We wish him the very best. Translink is now in search of a new CEO, and I'm pleased to be part of the search committee on the board representing the mayors. The Metro Council of Councils Sub-Regional Forum on Systemic Racism was held on 3 dates with Councillors Richter, Whitmarsh, Arneson, Ferguson, and Long attending. Thank you very much for attending that. I know, unfortunately, I couldn't, but I heard a lot about it. It was well attended. The annual Thank You for Caring Christmas Tea was held yesterday on November 20th. As once again, a very successful event. I'd like to thank everyone in our community for the generosity, and also to the hardworking committee who were, it was a bit of a daunting task to go virtual this year with the tea, but they pulled it off, and it was a fantastic show. I watched the whole thing, and I really do appreciate the work of the committee, and again, the work of the sponsors and those who donated towards families in Langley. Dr. Bonnie Henry provided the province with new mandatory measures to ensure our safety. And these include extending the previous orders until December the 7th. Socialized with core bubble only, immediate households is now province-wide. Indoor and outdoor events are prohibited. Places of worship must move to online. Face masks are now required at all indoor public and retail spaces for staff and customers. High-risk indoor group physical activities are prohibited. All other business with indoor group activities must update their COVID plans. No spectators are allowed at indoor and outdoor sports. Continue to limit travel to essential only. Office-based employers should support working from home until at least the new year. And inspections will be increasing to ensure compliance. And certainly watching around the world, I just saw this morning Toronto has imposed another lockdown. This is very serious. We certainly know that this is what was expected in the leading up to this. Is the second wave, and we're in that second wave. I attended the Metro COVID-19 task force, which is made up of mayors of the region, and Chair Dallowall read a report, and it was very interesting to me when he said that all of the modeling that the federal government has done to date has basically come to fruition. When they projected where we would be several months out, they've nailed it every time, and the projections going a month out are very, very disturbing and scary. We really do need to adhere to these measures to ensure our safety. I know we're all, getting tired of it, but being at Remembrance Day on November 11th, I was thinking of those who had to go to war, and some were gone for 4 or 5 years at a time, and the sacrifices they made, and all our sacrifices to wear a mask, stay home, and be careful. So I hope we can all be safe moving forward into this busy Christmas season, and hopefully with a vaccine on the horizon, we can get past this and regain some sense of normal life. But there is a bit of a sacrifice to be made now. And for me, it's not too bad. I like being at home. I can do a lot of work from my desk at home. So with that, that's my mayor's report. And I just want to mention that Councillor Richter attended the Metro Regional Parks Committee, and Councillor Ferguson, Metro Liquid Waste Committee, and Councillor Arneson was at the Metro Climate Action Committee. So if there's anything else to add, Councillor Long? Councillor Long and then Councillor Richter.
The Zero Waste Conference, and I
saw yes, thank you.
For you there on the stage at the end, and it was a terrific conference. It was a shame that more couldn't have been. Well, I think it was very well attended. Anyway, got a lot out of it. It was very well done and online, and it shows how we can use that technology instead of being in person. But it was terrific. A terrific conference put on by Metro Vancouver each year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate, I should have had that in my report, and thank you, Councillor Long, for bringing that up. But I did attend the Zero Waste Conference, and it was interesting. There was myself and Chair Dollywall there, and some staff. We gave closing remarks, but over 400 participants from all over the world were participating in that conference, and some excellent speakers and what we can do to move this forward, zero waste. And one word I heard is one of the R's is to refuse. So when you go shopping, you want to buy something, if you don't really need it, refuse it. It saves it going into the waste stream. And further, I just received a note from the clerk that the report today, since Friday, there's 1,933 more infections in BC and 17 deaths. So certainly sorry to hear about the 17 deaths, and it just shows how rapidly this is growing right now, and we do need to take this COVID seriously. Councillor Richter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just a quick question for you before I raise the parks matter I wanted to bring up. Did they use Zoom or Teams for the conference?
The conference was on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I think Zoom. Yeah, they had a Zoom thing going. It was quite. They do a virtual hand clapping, and everybody's clapping their hands, but you're going to see those are on the screen. But it was Zoom. But there's a way of doing Zoom without people participating. They can watch. Yeah.
I just asked that because of our earlier discussion about the difference between Zoom and Teams. Thank you.
That's right.
I just wanted to report back to Council on a question that was raised earlier concerning the Campbell Valley Park master plan. It came to Parks and it was approved there. It will include new trails for bikes, pedestrians, and equestrian, and that the trails would be separated. So this will be going to the Metro Board for approval later this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunst.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I attended also the Forum on Systemic Racism, but the week before. So I just wanted to make sure that was said. Yes. Also, along with Councillor Arneson, we attended the Vancouver Port presentation on the Roberts Bank terminal last week. So that was very interesting. So I just thought I'd put that out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to point out that I want to thank the board members, yourself and Councillor Richter, the emotion from our committee presented by myself and Mayor Marianne Booth for the reconciliation, and Metro Vancouver has been very, very supportive, and the workshops they've been having is certainly making an impact. That Metro Vancouver is front and center, making sure that they're doing everything they possibly can to open the door and to be instructive and helpful. As far as the treaty negotiation, it's ongoing, and we are very happy to be progressing forward. And now back to liquid waste. Again, they're doing television. You might see them on the air, television, where you do not flush things that say they're flushable. They're not flushable. So you put them in the garbage, because that way they protect the pumps and screens. And they actually have sites, and they actually have people can see what happens to the pipes and the screens. So there's a real aggressive program. They are also trying to work with the manufacturers to make sure they take off the flushable parts of the actual product. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for all those reports. And now, as the agenda was amended, We will now move, I need a motion to resolve into special closed meeting for the items on the agenda and on table. Oh, the clerk is, yes, okay. And so I need a mover, please.
Move.
Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Councillor Ferguson, your hand is up. Is that from before?
Got to put my hand down.
Okay, and Councillor Richter?
Yes, I would like to add 4 personnel items and 1 legal item.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed and carried. So we will resolve into special close. We'll take a 10-minute break. Come back at 3. What's my mouse watch say? Let's come back at 3:40 to come back and back on the same station. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's want to make sure members of council are here. If you just turn your camera on, we know that you're all here, and I get started with the meeting. Councillor Woodward, are you back just for the record? Oh, great.
Did Fergie bow out?
No, yes, Councillor Ferguson had to leave. Okay, I'm now going to reconvene the regular afternoon meeting of Township Laneway Council. And the next item is items brought forward for public information. Normally we just leave that on, but there has been an amendment to N2. So Ms. Bauer, we need a motion to change the amendment. Moved by Councillor Long and seconder. And it will be to change the first alternate to Councillor Arneson and the second alternate to Councillor Long. Those are the changes in N2. So it's been moved by Councillor Long. Is there a seconder? Councillor Arneson seconds. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Now we move on to items from prior meetings. This is the Housing Needs Report and Action Plan. There was a motion 2 was referred to this meeting. It's already been moved and seconded. So what I will do is start a new speakers list who would like to speak to it. It's like I say, it's on the table, moved and seconded, and the motion is to direct staff to monitor the floor area, number of bedrooms, and new secondary suites, report back to council within 3 years of the date of the report, and the council approve the terms of reference for the Housing Action Plan update in the form presently substantially as attachment B to this report. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank council for giving me a couple of extra weeks with this one. I did spend a significant or fairly healthy amount of time with it. I have no questions, no concerns, plan to support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, well, given the discussion that we had earlier this afternoon with the tiny homes person or the small homes person, I'm wondering if waiting for 3 years to get data back on whether we're building enough larger secondary suites, particularly given the needs of families, if we should be amending this from 3 years down to, well, it should be annually, but to start maybe with every 2 years.
I'll ask Mr. Seffi the reasoning for that. Mr. Seffi, if you could provide some background to the reason it's 3 years and if there's a ability to move it closer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Based on, I guess, the time it takes for decisions such as this, policy decisions such as this to, I guess, show their results in a meaningful way, staff had suggested 3 years, but certainly it can be reduced to 2 years if that's the direction of council.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to amend it to 2 years then, please.
I'll go to Councillor Arneson and Long, and then I'll come back to your amendment, if that's okay. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I actually would support that amendment because I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, just speaking to the main motion.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Long.
Oh yeah, well, I appreciate the report. Spent some time on it too. It looked pretty good, and I wouldn't like to see any changes. In fact, it says that within 3 years, so that could be 2 years certainly. But we're not discussing the amendment. But I just wanted to say that it's an excellent report, very lengthy, and very pertinent at this time. And I'm not sure quite how, now that it's come up, whether these tiny home, maybe I missed that in here. I don't know if there was any tiny home references, but we certainly have. I appreciated the presentation this afternoon. Maybe staff is the staff here that could speak to that, where these small homes may or may not fit into this report?
Mr. Steffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I have the expert in my office, Your Worship, Mr. Wilkes, and he assures me that there's reference, in terms of reference, that staff has asked council to endorse that relates to small homes. And I'll also use the opportunity, Your Worship, to advise that really there's no, I guess, there's nothing preventing a proponent to come forward or for council, in fact, to direct staff to proceed with a project that involves small homes. What we are doing is we're providing a bit more, I guess, a policy direction, incentive, if you will, as well as defining some of the terminology, but as well as maybe even removing some of the ambiguity and some of the bureaucracy around what may be a small home. But other than that, there's nothing preventing anyone to propose something like that. That said, I will look to Mr. Wood to add anything. Nope, nothing to add, Your Worship.
Okay, but
Thank you.
One of the examples given in the presentation, and in fact, you alluded to it, where you have a large lot. So in Aldergrove, for example, a bunch of large lots on certain streets, plenty of room for a tiny home or two in the backyard. But we don't allow that, right? Well, that would be very challenging. I guess what Mr. Safi's saying, well, anyone can apply, but I wonder how that would fit in. Anyway, food for thought, perhaps.
Thank you. And Councillor Richter, your amendment, and it could be that, don't want to put words in your mouth, but it could be the report back to council within 3 years, preferably 2 years of the date of this report, or you could just say within 2 years.
Actually, I was on sort of the same wavelength. I'd like to amend it to within 2 years and preferably 1 year.
Oh, okay. That may be a little bit short, but if there's a seconder to that amendment, Councillor Arneson, so that'd be 2, 1. Okay. Councillor Richter, do you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, I think it's important that we keep on top of these numbers, and certainly things are evolving at a very fast pace these days. And we see from numerous reports that are out there in the media with regards to the increasing number of homeless and the problems people are facing finding affordable housing. I just think we need to be very aware of what it is that we're doing and how it is that we can help. So I think this is an appropriate thing for us to know, because if developers aren't building this type of housing stock that we need to turn that around as quickly as we can, given the fact that quick isn't necessarily quick in municipal government terms. But I think just keeping track of it will help us stay on top of it.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, I'm not confused here. We're talking about the floor area, the number of bedrooms that can be used in a secondary suite. We recently increased the square footage allowed, because I think we used to have a bylaw that said you can only have so many square feet, and that got increased. I don't know if that's taken full effect yet. I guess it's going to have to play out. And that's what I believe this motion is, or the amendment is referring to. So I don't understand perhaps why the hurry, or B, don't we want to have the right information, and can we get that in 1 year or 2 years? And perhaps then Your Worship, staff can explain why they put it in there. And don't forget, I pointed out earlier, it says within 3 years, which means the report could come in 6 months, I suppose. But this is a new initiative that we've embarked on fairly recently, and I think it will need time to play out. But a comment from staff would be perhaps helpful, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I did ask staff. Staff did say they could do it in 2 years, so I think this motion allows for that. And then staff always have that ability to come back to council and for good reason explain why they need more time. But Mr. Sefi, would you want to comment on Councillor Long's concerns?
Thank you, Your Worship. As you just reiterated, Your Worship, there was some reasoning behind the 3-year suggestion, and that was really the time that takes for policy directions of council to be implemented and for some of the implications to be known. Other than that, really 2 years would be fine. As Councillor Long referenced, we did have a bylaw requirement that was mirroring the provincial legislation with the direction of council. That was amended, and that was about a year ago.
About 6 months ago.
6 months ago. And with that, Your Worship, we are just seeing the results of that, I guess, in the housing that we are seeing in the Township of Laneway, and likewise, or in similar fashion, any other changes will need to have adequate time to be, I guess, proven to be either practical or impractical, and then staff would certainly provide council with information and updates as necessary, no later than 2 years, based on the current deliberations of council.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh?
Yeah, I'm supportive of us moving to 2 years, but I think we should just leave it at 2 years and not put the preferable 1 year. I think it just provides clarity to what we're doing. So 2 years would be consistent. Staff would know what to expect. We would know what to expect, and I'm happy to go to 2 years and leave it there.
Okay, so with that, I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor and opposed? So long opposed, it carries. Now back to the main motion as amended. Councilor Whitmarsh, your hand is still up.
No, sorry, I'm moving the motion.
Oh, it's already moved. So
Gotcha.
the main motion as amended. I'm calling the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we move on to O2, and this is a motion to reconsider. And I have consulted with senior staff and consulted with the procedure bylaw and information I received. I will be calling this motion out of order. So with that, we'll move on to other business. P1 is fireworks hotline. Councillor Richter.
Thank you. I just would like to move my motion, and then I'd like to speak to it. So I'll move the motion. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Davis seconds. Councillor Richter, go ahead.
Yeah, it seems to me that this past year was this past month, actually, not even a month ago. We've had a very big problem with fireworks in the community, and I would like to put this motion forward to basically get staff to report back on whether or not we can have some sort of a monitoring system put in place where people that are experiencing bad effects from excessive fireworks have a place to call and get some action on it. And that's the purpose of the motion. I don't see this hotline having to operate more frequently than maybe twice a year. Halloween definitely, possibly July 1st as well. But the impact on animals and quiet neighborhoods is something that we need to take seriously and try to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
I mean, I kind of put it to a kind of a COVID release of tensions and so forth. It's only once or twice a year. This year, Halloween and Diwali were quite close. I don't know if it's always that close, but so, and I don't know if we have the manpower to man this hotline, and what will they do? It's already pretty much illegal to let them off. So, and I'm wondering about the availability in the future. So, you know, let's leave it the way it is. It's 1 or 2 days a year. If that.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Well, I read this and I thought, what a good idea that we can follow up on what I know was quite a distressing time for a variety of individuals for different reasons when there seemed to be an over-exuberance, I'm going to call it, in terms of firework let-off. While I appreciate this motion in principle, I am concerned that if we go forward, and I know it's only asking for a report to consider this, but how we're going to manage this from a cost recovery basis. And where I'm going with my comments is that personally, I feel we should have an absolute ban on fireworks at this point, similar to what Vancouver has undertaken, because that way, I think that it would be easier to manage. It's not, I was just looking at what they have decided to do. You can still have fireworks there, but they can only be discharged by technicians with an appropriate permit. To me, part of the challenge would be if you just had a hotline, there would be so many calls from people. And from my point of view, fireworks can be lit and come from so many different places. Just trying to hunt somebody down. There's parks, there's, you know, people gather in all sorts of places. And unfortunately, I also think that we're not going to have to just deal with a couple of days a year, because it seems like more and more there's always an expanded opportunity and reason to set off more fireworks. So I don't think I'll be supporting this, but I would support something to contain the kind of fireworks that we've seen, because it is a public cost, it's a nuisance, and a lot of people, I think, would appreciate it if we just shut it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Richter.
No, I completely agree with Councillor Arneson from the point of view, I think we should just ban them. I thought that years ago.
They already are.
And what we put in place years ago was a system where you had to get a permit to let them off, and you had to be trained in order to let them off. I don't even think the permitting system is working. And the way I've worded this resolution is precisely for the reason that perhaps staff would like to come back and say to us, just ban them. And I think that this particular motion gives them the opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Backen, is the bylaw legislation, does it already ban fireworks in the Township of Langley?
As I recall, Your Worship, it does. Mr. Sefi, are you out there? You're probably more up to speed with the bylaw than I am.
Or Chief Campbell?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm not quite up to speed with it. Maybe Chief Campbell, if he's around, he might be a bit more up to speed. Other than that, staff would certainly be able to provide council back with some information as part of a memorandum, maybe.
Your Worship, while we look for Mr. Gamble to come online, we can say that there were no permits issued this year at all. So any activity that was taking place was not authorized by permit. And I believe that there were some attempts to enforce. But Mr. Gamble, are you out there?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on there. Can I take it? You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do have it in our bylaw. You have to, as Councillor Richter has mentioned, have a license to use the fireworks, and it's actually quite restrictive. That we have had people inquire about it, but by the time they look at what they need and in the time that they would need to do it, they don't follow through with it. We haven't had selling of fireworks in years. The challenge always will be for us is people buying it from an area that it does allow the sale. But I know we've been out to calls, bylaws have been out at calls, but it's a tough one because by the time they've letting the fireworks off, they're gone by the time we get there. So.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, I will then call a question on P1. All those in favor and opposed? So Councillor Woodward, Paraphrase, Councillor Long opposed, Councillor Davis opposed, Councillor Kunst opposed, Councillor Whitmarsh opposed. The motion fails.
Mayor, I actually was a little bit late on the draw.
Oh, you're in favor. Okay, so Councillor Woodward is in favor. Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter, Aldergrove Mall.
Is my mic on? Okay. Yes,
you're good.
I'd like to move the motion about, I appreciate that we did get a report from staff, but of sorts today, but I just think that we've been hearing this business. Well, I guess I should wait until I get a seconder and then I can speak, sorry.
That's fine. Is there a seconder? Councillor Kunst, go ahead.
Okay.
Councillor Richter.
We have been hearing now for the last, for this term that, yeah, it's going to be December and the tenant issue will be dealt with and we'll have it taken down. And now we're hearing the same thing. It's, well, the end of this year. Well, what can we do to expedite this? Can we expedite this? What are the issues that the proponent is running up against in terms of trying to get his application moving more quickly? I believe that we did put an expedited status on this particular application. So I'd just like a report back from staff on what we can do to actually expedite it and get it done before this term is over. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So I appreciate some opportunity to discuss this and elaborate a little bit more. My thought is just quite simplistic, is that irrespective of the conditions that are being worked through by the proponent, which I don't doubt are complicated just because of multi-jurisdictional issues, but my opinion is that the demolition of that operation, aside from some remaining and very short-lived now leaseholds, means that in good faith, I wouldn't know why we couldn't anticipate that the building demolition could take place sometime soon. I went by there yesterday just to take another look, and I was just, I mean, it's just, to me, beyond comprehension why we would allow something that's got barbed wire that's strewn across the back. And, you know, I understand from a point of view of trying to keep people out, but I really think that it's well more than high time for that to end. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so no further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor, P2, and opposed? Councillor Long opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Woodward, you have a notice of motion, Langley Board of Education, local by-election administration.
Yeah, I'll just, I don't need to read the whole thing, Mr. Mayor, I'll just move it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Richter.
Motion?
P3, it's on the agenda, so that's been moved. Seconded by Councillor Richter. I think just for a little background, I mean, I'm fine with this. It's a letter to the ministry, but I just asked Ms. Bauer, just give us so we're all on the same page and understand the election procedure. Just give us a little bit of background on how this works and who funds it and that, so we're all on the same page. But I have no problem with this motion. Ms. Bauer.
Again, the school board in the School Act does have the ability to tell the Township of Langley that we need to run their election. They are responsible for all the costs, so it's any cost we incur, they have to reimburse us for. From the time we are advised of the election, we have a certain number of days, I believe it's 30 days, in which a report comes to council, so a chief election officer and deputy chief election officer can be proclaimed, and from that time on you then have 80 days in which to hold the election. So at the very latest it will be the end of February that we would be required to hold an election.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Long.
Mr. Mayor, I haven't had a chance to speak to the motion yet.
Oh, sure. I thought you didn't want to. Okay, I didn't realize you want to speak to it. Go ahead.
I just wanted to give the rationale here. So yeah, I think for me, I wanted to get one clarification also in addition to that, Mr. Mayor, with staff before I say anything more. Can I get just confirmation that the Township of Langley conducting local municipal elections for ourselves and for the Board of Education does not have an absentee option for mail-ins? Just to make that 100% clear beforehand.
Ms. Bauer?
Actually, at this point, I'm aware that I can apply for an order in council in order to supersede our bylaw and have mail-in elections. I have looked into it, and I have several suggestions that other municipalities have used that I would go to the ministry to ask for an order in council so that we could use mail-in ballots for this election.
Okay, so I mean, that's at least that if this doesn't proceed or Elections BC, of course, refuses the request, and that we usually have that option. I think I'd be a little concerned about trying to do that in a very, very tight time frame to develop secrecy envelopes, interval envelopes, outer envelopes, and then scrutineering infrastructure that I'm sure would follow if a significant number of those were used. So I think for us to do all of that in 80 days is a tall order. Having seen how it's been done with Elections BC by the thousands, they certainly have this worked out. And it seems strange to me that we would attempt to duplicate all of that when they could simply conduct it. It would be nice for the BC NDP government to also pay for these by the provincial government, obviously, since they're the ones that have created a number of these around the province, not just in the Township of Langley. And for us to not have to carry on an election during a pandemic, to push this on to Elections BC, which has that experience and has just gone through that process. So this is here because of the pandemic, because of the rising COVID numbers. And I think we should conduct a by-election to fill that seat, given that there's a couple of years left in the term. So I don't think that we should be the ones doing that. I don't think our staff should be doing that, trying to create that absentee option in that short period of time. And that's the rationale for me requesting that the Elections BC do it. Thank you.
Thank you. No, appreciate it anytime we get the province to pick up the costs. And but by legislation, the school board's requested that we have to proceed. Councillor Long?
Yeah, I don't know where Election BC comes in anywhere in the School Act. So the motion here is basically asking the provincial government to change the School Act under section 37 and 36, well, 36 first and then 37, which says the municipal council must conduct the trustee elections in the electoral area. So I wonder what the likelihood of them changing the School Act in time. But anyway, it's probably worth writing a letter. But I guess we'll just see what the response is. But I mean, if it's in the School Act, wouldn't that have to be amended before elections could? Yeah. And I don't think Election BC doesn't run on municipal elections. We run them.
They don't run them, but they oversee, a lot of aspects of it. But this is a letter to go forward. So I'm
send that. A good idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, this is I appreciate the intent of it. I think there's some good things here. Certainly, making a request is fine with me. I don't know if they'll go for it, but I'm fine with making that request. For Part A, what I don't understand really is why we would make a request to the province of BC to have them pay the costs and not the school district. Why wouldn't we have the school district make that? Why don't they make that request? It's not a cost that we bear anyway, so I'm not sure why we're asking on behalf of another group that haven't even asked us to ask this, why we would ask to have that cost borne by the province. Why not just let the school board ask that, since it's their by-election?
Hopefully they'll have a motion tomorrow. I don't know, usually it's Tuesday. I don't know when their board meeting is, but it'd be nice if they did the same thing and copied this and put a similar motion through. Councilor Woodward?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer A. I mean, I'll try to be helpful there. I mean, obviously they would want the provincial government to give them additional funding for this. It's just from an outlook of, single taxpayer. It's not really anything more than that. We all are here to serve the same people that live in the township, and obviously I would prefer that it come from additional funding from the province, not coming out of the school district budget, would be for them not funding something else. So given that it's the BC NDP that called this election in the pandemic, given that they have much, throwing around billions of dollars during the pandemic, I'm sure they can find money. Hopefully they would agree to find money to fund these by-elections. Again, not just our situation here, but I believe there's 7 or 8 around the province, local government officials and school trustees that have moved up to MLA. So I think that they should, hopefully, Elections BC will step in and do them all at the same time or roughly on the same schedule and administrate them all and pay for them all. And hopefully this letter will be coming from other municipalities. I think I know of one other one that's already gone out. Other municipalities will be following suit and requesting that they do it, potentially holding them all on the same day as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Carries unanimously. Move to any other business? I have a piece of business that staff have asked me to bring up with council, and that's regarding the public hearing procedures for the retail cannabis bylaws that will be coming forward. It's our process right now is to have written submissions, and we have requests from the proponents to present to council, and my staff and I have talked, and maybe Ms. Barber wants to launch into on some of the legislative requirements here, but I think written submissions may assist during this COVID time to reduce the numbers of people in our chambers, because if we do for one, we may have to do for all, and it can get quite full, and we want to ensure that we are protecting everybody, but yet we want to make sure we hear everybody. So that is what we've discussed. I'd just like to get a sense from council, and perhaps we could have a motion to give staff some direction. Councillor Arneson.
Oh, sorry, Your Worship. It wasn't about that. I'll take my hand down.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just looking for just a little discussion that we can form a motion. Councillor Richter.
No. Sorry, same thing for me. Okay. I had another item.
Okay, Councillor Long.
Yeah, well, thanks, Your Worship. I thought that's the way we were going. So
yes, but I think council staff are just because we're getting some requests. So, I would recommend a motion that all presentations by the proponent and by the residents who wish to provide would be by written submission. So is that correct, Ms. Bauer? How would you like to have that motion?
Wouldn't
I'll let Ms. Bauer just.
Well, yeah. Can I? Okay.
Yeah, just hold on. We'll get a motion kind of worded, and then this is more of a discussion.
Yeah, because
Ms. Bauer?
I think the motion would be that all submissions on the cannabis bylaw matters be written submissions. No in-person submissions would be accepted.
Councillor Long?
Yeah, so, all right, I get that, but I had the impression all along that we would be, I think you even made the comment, sort of interviewing the proponent to some extent and allowing how is the proponent going to respond to the concerns brought up if the proponent isn't allowed? So would a hybrid be that written submissions from the public and that the proponent may be allowed to speak, or how? Yeah.
No, it's a bit of a slippery slope. We want to keep it equal for everyone. So I think that's why staff are recommending this.
All right, so then the proponent would not be allowed to speak or address the concerns or make a pitch to council.
They will be able to make a pitch to council through written submission.
Yeah. I'll move that.
Okay. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Arneson. Councillor Davis?
Okay, so if we do this for this for that report, are we going to do it for all the public hearings?
Yes, actually it is. This is just, I think, reaffirming the current direction that staff have, and because it is fairly a big event, I think staff just wanted a reaffirmation. Is that correct, Ms. Bauer? So it's just basic reaffirming what we're already doing under our procedure.
So
bylaw and legislation.
When they give us a written submission, where will the written submission be? Will it be in, is it going to be in items distributed for council, or will it be in a package stating these are the written submissions for such and such A?
Ms. Bauer will respond to that. Ms. Bauer?
As I anticipate there'll be many written submissions on this, I'm going to be making a separate package for council, which will also constitute a separate Granicus entry unto itself.
Okay, so it'll be.
I'm not a Granicus person.
We'll make sure that you get, the staff will make sure that you get all of the.
I will get a printed copy out for you, Mr.
Divided by
Davis.
Proponents and respondents.
The dinosaur, the tree lover. Okay, so now, what about the next one? Like, will it be, this one's really busy because there'll be lots, but will we have written submissions for the next one? And apparently Mayor Froese, you said we would. So how will they come? Will they come in a separate package?
Yeah. Yes. You'll get them
so
all.
They'll all come in separate packages. Yeah. Okay. So they're not going to get lost.
No. What we'll end up doing is, as the applications come through in their groups, we'll make a separate package for each group as it comes to council.
Okay. So put the no's in one and the yeses in the other for me. Okay, forget it. I'm teasing. Okay, it's no joke. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I really object to this. I mean, getting a cannabis store in your neighborhood is a major impact on your neighborhood, either for the good or for the bad. But you should be able to have a say in person about your impressions of the impact on your neighborhood. In addition, I believe Councillor Long has quite rightly raised the point about the proponent being allowed the opportunity to be present to address any of the concerns that were raised at the public hearing. And no doubt the proponents will have some concerns that they do have to raise. This is going to be a very difficult decision for council to make because there's 20 applications for 8 locations. And I think the more input we can get from the more different sources is better for us in our decision making. So I'm not going to support this motion. I know it will streamline things and make things more efficient, but I just don't see how it's going to positively and completely help us in our decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I can go either way on this one. I don't see how we're going to administrate 20 applications by written submission. It'll take me hours to categorize them by application and figure out who is who. Do they work there? Are they employees? Are they residents? I mean, so I'm not really looking forward to just going through all the written submissions, and I can imagine there'll be a significant, handful of the proponents will be a lot better organized than others, generating a volume of positive emails and other things. that I have to now go through. It'd be much easier to see, to talk and look them in the eye, so to speak. Maybe we should just postpone this then until there's more comfort with having proponents come into the building and present to us at a proper public hearing. So if we're just doing away with public hearings and public input and proponents' rights to speak to council, I don't want 20 calls from 20 lobbyists for these applications either. So I think this highlights the flaw in the process. And if we're not able to administrate the public hearing in a safe way, maybe it should just simply be postponed. So I don't support people not having the right to speak to council on a cannabis store potentially located in their neighborhoods. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, so when you mentioned this kind of confirms our practice, my understanding is the practice is if there isn't a neighborhood community plan or OCP adjustment required, in other words, they've covered all the bases that that we'll just get written submissions for that. That's the policy we have currently. But with the marijuana stores, it's a whole new world. So there isn't sort of a norm where you can check all the boxes and you've complied with everything. I know Councilor Woodward will attest to this, that the thing moves around a bit. It's pretty challenging, extremely challenging. So I'm hesitant. Why can't we use Zoom? There's the meeting we went. Well, you mentioned that the zero wait, there were 400 participants. Can we not have the proponent and because I understand the safety with staff and having people congealing, congregating around the hall, excuse me. Can they not Zoom in? I know it's challenging.
Yeah, in the zero waste, they didn't Zoom in. They were watching. The only people that spoke were the panelists, but that's slightly different.
Anyway,
but this is we just need to come to some direction. A hybrid of once all the submissions are received, does the proponent have an opportunity to respond before we make a decision and provide? They can be provided with all the submissions and given time to respond to us. I think that would be appropriate and can be done in a safe manner also.
There was a Zoom meeting for council of councils, and I think there was over 100 participants in that, and everyone got a chance to speak by raising their hand.
But that can be difficult to manage. Mr. Backen wishes to speak. Mr. Backen.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Just as a reminder, this is actually still intended to be a public hearing, which means we have to go make sure we have the documents, the records, and all of those issues, and that can be done in written format, or it could be done in an in-person format, as we've done with the OCP amendments. It would mean trying to set something up in the facility, which is partially workable, or the other option also is, if there's a lack of comfort with that, is perhaps to simply defer these until we can actually have regular public hearings, which could be a matter of months. I'm not suggesting that. I'm simply laying out the options are written, maintain, or having a special direction to have a public hearing meeting or meetings for these applications, or to defer. But the challenge to change the technology in the midst of this would take some time in and of itself, because of course it is still a public hearing meeting that we're obligated to have.
So Mr. Backen, just to follow up, would it be possible to do where once the public hearing from the public for whichever bylaw we're working on is closed, that the proponent would have an opportunity to respond, and that would be by written, because then they would have all that same information council would have, and we give them an opportunity to respond. So once we close the public portion of the public hearing, we would adjourn it so that they could respond the next night or something. Is that a possibility? I'm trying to find a way that we are fair to everyone, but.
No, I understand the attempt, Your Worship. I'm concerned if we're closing it to a member of the public and then the proponent speaks and then someone wishes to rebut what the proponent said.
We never do that in practice. Practice, the public is closed, the proponent has opportunity to respond to the public's concerns. That's what we always do.
Yeah. No, I recognize that's what we do. We have them respond. We close off the submissions, but when it's actually a written submission versus that, I think that's something we just want to check, because there's a bit of a change of format there that I'd want to make sure we're solid on before we commit to it.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Kunst?
Yeah, that was my concern, is that will the proponent get all the information and then be able to respond? So I guess I'm still not really clear on that.
I think that's vital that they do, but how we manage that. Look at the staff for help on it. Ms. Bauer? under the legislation in the public hearing, this is going to be a public hearing. We hear from those members of the public who wish to speak or provide written submissions. There's a point where that ends, and then the proponent always has an opportunity to respond to the concerns. Cannot that be done by written submission after? And we wouldn't expect it the same night.
I believe it can be, because at that point you are adding information after the public hearing. We would have to leave the public hearing open in order for the proponent to make their submissions and then close it after.
Okay. So just bear with me, Council. I'm just trying to get clear. So my normal process in a public hearing is I ask for submissions from the public. I ask 3 times. When there are no more submissions, then I close the public portion of it, and I ask the proponent if they wish to respond. At that point, there are no more submissions from the public. The public don't rebut the proponent. It just gives the proponent an opportunity to respond to the concerns raised. So, for example, traffic concerns. People are going to be backed up, and there's not a proper left turn lane or something, and so they can explain, well, we know we've done a study and this is what we're going to do. We're not asking for more submissions. We're just asking them to respond, which we always have done in the public hearing. Cannot that be done by written submission?
Your Worship, I'll chime in. You've actually inadvertently described it in that the public hearing continues. At one part, you segment the discussion, so some are for the public, and then the proponent can actually make a submission and rebut before the closure of the public hearing itself.
Right.
So we would have to actually transmit that into being a written format where the public hearing would have to somehow stay open until the written submissions of the proponent, the public were received, and then the written submissions of the proponents were received. It's that gap that causes us a bit of concern, because ordinarily the time frame is very narrow. It's at that point in the meeting. And in theory, if someone jumped up and said, aha, I've got something to say, we'd have to have a ruling from the chair on that. And of course, that doesn't take place. But now if it's happening in a written submission type format, the time period is elongated, and it becomes a bit of a challenge to say, well, what happens in all these various scenarios? So not saying it couldn't be done, simply saying, well, that's what we want to check on before we go too much deeper into it.
Because, I see an issue, even if the proponent was able to be in the public hearing in person, once we've heard from the public, there may be a lot of written submissions that the proponent hasn't had a chance to hear. So then I would close the public portion, then adjourn the public hearing to another date several days later, gives the proponent their chance to come and speak. So it's an adjournment. Is that a doable thing? Or
it may be. We're being very cautious, Your Worship, because then it does create other arguments. So I don't think that we really can commit to it tonight. I think that's something we'd have to take away if that's the option the council wishes to utilize, because what we're really saying to a higher level is we're taking it down to the 3 options I outlined that we want to do by written submissions, but structure the written submissions in such a way, because of the COVID environment, is to actually maintain our existing practice. And that's something that, if that's the direction, we can try to find a way to implement that.
So it seems that we don't have the clear answers. Would it be appropriate to refer this to staff?
I'd like to do that.
For an opinion, legal opinion, or to refer to staff to report back. I think then you'd have the opportunity to get a legal opinion. Would that be more appropriate, Mr. Backen?
I think so. If you simply refer it to staff, just plain refer it to staff, we're going to come up with a strategy, because we are hearing that the written submissions do cause some concerns for some members of council. So having heard that, we understand we've got to find a way to make the whole piece work.
I appreciate that, because I think tonight I hear from council there's good points from everyone, and we want to make sure it's fair to everyone concerned, and how we do that.
So you
is important. So move referral. It's a move by Councillor Long to refer to staff to report back to council. And seconder, just before you second by Councillor Richter. Councillor Long speaking to the referral.
Yeah, can the staff include any other suggestions, which could be that the proponent may be able to come and speak in person afterwards, or maybe not, or maybe it could be Zoom, everything that's
right. I think that's what staff will do. They'll come back with some options and some
other
recommendations.
How they do it too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. On that, okay, I'm going to call the question on the referral. All those in favor? Opposed? Everyone's in favor? Okay, carries. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to go to other business. Councillor Long, other business? Did you have, or hands up? Okay. Oh, Mr. Backen has a word to say.
Your Worship, just before we advance, we just want to make sure we're keeping our scheduling right. So, Ms. Bauer, do we have advertising in place for the December the 7th? So I think what we're saying to council is the newspaper ads to have a public hearing on December the 7th are in place. already been published to the public. So that means that we may not be able to report back to council. We may simply have to implement some structure that's going to actually work, Your Worship. It's just a matter of timing because we have to maintain that process.
So we are planning a special meeting for the budget on the 30th.
30th.
So we could bring this back as part of that agenda to deal with.
We could have a discussion on what our options are, Your Worship, to advance it, but we're going to have to maintain the ability to hold something on December the 7th.
Okay, so I'll leave that with you to manage through that. Thank you. All right, thanks for bearing with me, Council. Councilor Richter, other business?
Yes, I would like to refer item number 1 on items distributed to Council November 19th. This is a letter from Susan Murray. It's the second time she's written, and it's with regards to the proposed Infinity Properties subdivision, and the issue is walking trails in the area. This item has come up numerous times in the recent past from area residents, and I would like to have an update from staff on whether or not these walking trails can be accommodated in this particular development subdivision proposal, and if it will be accommodated. Clearly, it's not in front of council yet. We haven't seen anything about it. It will come to council eventually, but I'd like to have a report on the walking trails issue specifically.
Mr. Backen, can that be a direction to memo to council? Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councilor Richter. Anything else? Okay, Councilor Arneson.
Oh boy, I'll take my hand down. Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to bring forward a time-sensitive motion. So with the indulgence through Your Worship to the rest of my council colleagues, I have received some information from our legislative clerk under 6.07 of the procedures bylaw. So just to make a synopsis, it means that motions coming before council that are time sensitive and haven't been pre-circulated can be a motion deemed to be received and therefore debated if there is a vote of council advancing that forward. As long as it's deemed to have a minimal impact. So I assume that there's a definition of that, but that's under the premise under which I bring forward this motion.
Okay, and if you could provide the motion.
Motion? Sure. I apologize that I'm not able to provide it in a written format because I was having issues with my computer. However, I can read it. It's fairly straightforward, so you have to bear with me. Whereas the former building existing on the township-owned Alder Grove Inn site has now been demolished and the site remains unoccupied and derelict, and whereas the site is centrally located and visible to local residents as well as to travel through traffic and is therefore ideally situated for a 2020 Christmas display, and whereas the township is committed to interim uses that are publicly supported and address the community interest in the site, therefore be it resolved that the township staff be directed to review and operationalize the installation of a large Christmas tree on the existing site by utilizing no more than $2,500 from the council contingency fund, and furthermore, that any opportunity for in-kind and community volunteer support will be determined once the project has satisfied any logistical and timeline requirements identified by the township staff. I so move.
And I'll second that, Your Worship, if you'll accept it.
Okay, so just some procedural, and I think there's a way through this. First of all, the procedure that section of the procedure bylaw that Councilor Arneson referenced is it says if a member deems the item urgent, provided notice is given to township clerk prior to 10 a.m. the day the meeting, adding of late items to the agenda. So technically this should have been added to the agenda, and then it's a late item added to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. However, council does have the opportunity to vary the agenda at any time, and so
it's a Christmas tree.
So council, okay, hang on. You're pointing something out to me.
I'm sorry.
What'd you say?
I said it's
okay,
a Christmas tree.
So just hold on. It's a procedure. We're working our way through. Councilor Davis, so just give me a chance.
I'm sorry. I'm just being.
Okay, so if I consider this to be a minimal impact, it can be added. However, I'm going to refer to Mr. Backen on the cost of this, and if it's minimal, then we can proceed with the motion. If not, it may have to come to the next meeting. But Mr. Backen, I'd like to dispose of it tonight somehow.
Oh, well, thank you, Your Worship. Well, I guess you're asking, is the sum of $2,500 minimal? We respect all amounts of funding, and I realize this is setting a precedent, but given the staff time involved and the needs to operate a meeting, I would have to say that $2,500 would be considered minimal in the context of our overall budget.
Okay, so the cost to the township would be $2,500 to install this, given the conditions?
Maximum.
Okay. Okay, then I believe from the clerk, I can let this proceed. I'll accept the motion, let council make the decision. So it's been moved by Councillor Arneson, second by Councillor Long, and discussion, Councillor Richter.
Okay, what's the rush to pass this tonight? We're going to have another meeting in December. Can't we deal with it then? And the second thing is, I don't think this can be done for $2,500, just looking at the safety aspects as well as the condition of the site. It's a mud hole. And if you put a Christmas tree up there in the mud hole, are you going to leave the barrier fences around so people won't be walking up to the Christmas tree and falling into the holes and pits all over that site? I mean, it's a nice gesture, and I know the Christmas parade is coming up in Aldergrove, but I don't think we should be rushing to make this decision tonight. I don't support it because it's just too rushed, and I question the safety of the location that it's going to be put in.
Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. And so I do appreciate the feedback about this. And really the reason that I brought forward today is because we don't have another meeting in order to, I think in a timely way, we're already somewhat pressed for time, but I don't think it's an impossibility at this point. So it is one of those ones where I felt justified to bring it forward, even though there isn't a lot of lead time. So I'm just concerned that if we leave it too long, it in fact cannot happen at all. Secondarily, as to the site, I've had some discussion with Mr. Backen earlier this afternoon. I realized, because I went yesterday to look at the site and it is muddy, but there's an opportunity to place a tree in the parking lot as an alternative, if that would be helpful. Thirdly, $2,500 is kind of a ballpark. It couldn't be more than that. I think that there are entities in the township that would likely know the most about the cost of a tree and the logistics to put it up. And I think my intention was to draft it in such a way as to put forward something that would be logistically possible in the timelines and the financial budget that's been identified. And so I would expect that if staff went back and said, it's going to cost us $10,000 to do this in the time frame you've suggested, then that would be a non-starter. But for me, I don't want to just, throw it out of hand in the possibility that potentially township staff, the fence. I assume that the fence, for safety reasons, will remain around the property. It could be adorned in some way to make it look a little more festive, but I don't see that as an attractive nuisance where we're going to get a bunch of people that are going there to touch the tree in the mud. So I know it's not a lot of time to debate, and really it's up to the will of council to determine whether or not they would even support this as an idea. But primarily it's going to be up to staff to figure out, do we have the resources and the timeline to do it? And frankly, if they say no, then I'll just accept the fact that that would be the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, folks, this is a great idea, I think, and I'm very certain that it could be done within that budget, because I already checked around with some prices of trees, and there's lots of people willing to perhaps put up a good deal in terms of getting a nice tall tree. This is the motion was very well. It was quite lengthy, and I don't have it in front of me, but I remember that, first of all, we're charging staff with the job to do it, so it's going to be done safely, going to be done properly. We've given them a budget. If it can't be done, as Councillor Arneson says, that's another issue. But I think if you all think about it, that's a fair amount of money to put up a tree, and I think that it can be accomplished quite easily. And staff are doing it, so the safety issues and so forth will be their concern. It's a great way, I think, to if we could all agree on it, it would be super. It's going to be a nice thing for the community. I hate to tell you, but I don't think the Christmas parade is going to happen because of the COVID and the latest PMO, the health officers. I'm not sure where that sits at the moment. But anyway, it's a great idea. Let's do it. And let's let staff get into it. I think they'll enjoy it as well, as will all the folks that drive by and see it.
Councillor Davis?
Yes, just all this listening to a Christmas tree, and if we can do it safely, and maybe we need a Christmas tree there. I feel my heart has just gone 3 times the size, so my Grinchness has come out. Let's put the Christmas tree there. Thank you.
Mine's 2 sizes too small. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I guess it'll be up to me to be the Grinch in this scenario. I mean, I find it. I've had one question though, Mr. Beck, and through Mr. Beck and through you, Mr. Mayor. Is there power on the site to be available to decorate the tree?
I don't believe there's any hydro connections at this point. We either have to use neighbors or go with a situation where there would not be lights, but just simply a daytime type display. We've done no preparation for this, so I'm not sure we've given much thought in terms of how the decorations would be done.
Okay, because again, I'm not sure what kind of tree can be secured for $2,500 when it's 10 feet tall and it's in the middle of a gigantic parking lot. Maybe we can put Councillor Long's name in front of it, so they know I had nothing to do with a goofy small tree in the middle.
Well,
of
it's going to be at least 30 feet high, which is about the size of the one in Fort Langley, Council.
Maybe I can finish talking, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, I think that, ideally what we would do is take Christmas decorations in some of our downtown cores more seriously than this. I would support a more substantial amount for proper Christmas decorations on lamp standards, for example, or a number of other initiatives, but not really sort of a, to me, a little bit of a goofy gesture based on the fact that the older inn was just removed. I think we should let staff clean up the site. I don't really support the idea of an unlit Christmas tree in the middle of a parking lot. I think if we were to do that in Brookswood or Willoughby or Walnut Grove, it would be a bit of a joke. So here I sort of appreciate the desire to deal with the site, but I really don't see the point, to be honest. And I think it'll just end up being a bit of a laughing joke, honestly. Thanks.
Thank you. Speak for first time. Okay, I'll just speak now. Basically, I think it's a great idea, but I'm not going to support it. I think it's too rushed. We don't know all of the factors in the site. I think there's been some concerns already raised about power, the property, who's going to watch this tree. I mean, I just think it needs more development there before we can put a tree there. Again, the funding, it's a guesstimate. It's not well thought out. I think it is timing. Certainly, maybe next year is better. It's more time to put this to staff and get some idea what the costs are. I don't know of any other tree that the township puts up. Usually it's a private organization that'll do it. It'll be like the Fort Langley Community Hall decorates their tree. They don't ask us to decorate it. I think it's something that's a little bit too premature. I think it's a great idea, but I'm at this point not going to support it. So for a second time, Councillor Richter.
Yes, I'd like to move referral of this to staff for a report on the feasibility and timelines to achieve this for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go through the second times and then we'll go back to that. Councillor Long and then Councillor Arneson.
I was going to say more, but I was afraid that I might. Okay, so I've already checked into the price. First of all, the tree is at least 30 feet high, which is the size of the tree that's in Fort Langley in front of the hall. I'm sure Councillor Woodward's familiar with that because he lives in Fort Langley. Every construction site has a power pole. There's a power pole right there near the site, and it certainly wouldn't be a difficulty to pull power from it. LED lights take very little electricity. So $2,500, in fact, may be quite excessive. If the tree is going to cost $300 or $400, you have transportation and putting and erecting it, which I think can be done in-house. So there'll be a lot of in-kind contributions from our staff. So come on, you guys, don't rob this this idea from the community, maybe just because just because I support it, some of you may not. Thank you very much, but hopefully that's not the case. However, the motion says there's a upper limit so that we're not spending a fortune. I think if staff can't do it, they'll come back anyway. So there's no need for a referral. But let's end the meeting on a positive note. It can be done quite easily. I could do it, but of course I'm not going to. Staff are going to take care of it so it's done properly, I suppose. It's not going to be a joke. It's going to be a very nice looking tree. There's already a fence there, can be cleaned up a little bit. And I think it's going to be a fabulous project. So I know you've already said you're not going to vote for your worship, but maybe you'll change your mind and let's just give it a go, please.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Thank you, Worship. Well, not to belabor the point in particular, it's unfortunate that it has come this late in the season. However, since the demolition really just took place, it wasn't really a contemplation of my mind to consider this at all. Although, like I said, it would have been better had that happened sooner. However, to see the site as it is now and to know that people are struggling because of 2020 and all the challenges that we've had, it seemed to me to be a way to consider uplifting the public spirit, to put something there. It may not look like the Rockefeller tree, which, by the way, was subject to some derision as well. However, I do believe it can be a lit tree. I do believe that the community would be very supportive of doing this. I don't think it's going to fall down on anybody. And I don't have a problem with referring it, except that I don't know how we're going to meet the timeline if we can't get a response back sooner than our next meeting. So that's my challenge. That's the only reason why I wouldn't support having it referred back, because then it absolutely would make it too late to do anything. Thank you.
Councillor Richter, you wish to make a referral motion?
Yes, I do. I want to refer this to staff for a report, and I also want included in the report if it's fair to be doing this in one community and not all of the communities that we serve.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Kuntz seconds. So on the referral,
over here.
Councillor Kuntz, are you seconding Councillor Kuntz? The second hand go up. Okay, seconded. And Councillor Kuntz, you wish to speak to it? You're muted. You're muted. There you are.
I mean, I like the idea of a Christmas tree, but I do think that it's come very quickly, and would like to have a little more information about what it all might look like. I haven't actually been to see the site, so I'm not really sure where that Christmas tree would be. And so, yeah, I would like to get more information, especially on the safety aspect of it. Yeah, so I would support the referral.
Okay, thank you. All right, on the referral, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
I couldn't seem to activate the button here because I was trying to find
it. Yeah. Oh, okay. So call the question. All those in favor and opposed to the referral? Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis, Councillor Long opposed. It's been referred. Is there any other business? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to terminate.
Termination!
Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Favor, opposed, carried. Thank you. I think you scared the kids, Councillor Davis.
Good night, everyone. Take that mask off, Jack, or you're going to get sick.
Good night.
Breathe in all your air.
Thank you.
Bye.